Chapter 1023. Only boasting and not showing some ability. If he messed things up, he might lose his life. Yu Qianqiu thought to himself as he snickered in his heart. The couple stared at the dazzling green flame in his palm. Their pupils gradually widened, then shrunk at the same time. They cried out involuntarily, "Green flame." They could not help but be excited. Based on their experience, they naturally knew that green flame was an indispensable ingredient in cultivating the true samadhi fire. In other words, the person in front of them was not boasting. Since he could control the green flame, it was indeed possible that he could cure their daughter's injuries. The green flame quickly retracted into his palm. Yu Qianqiu raised an index finger to his lips and shushed them. He pointed downstairs and whispered with shifty eyes, "You have to know that if word of this gets out, I'm afraid Jean Tai will be the first to not let me off." The couple nodded in ecstasy. The Snow Emperor even whispered, "We understand. Don't worry, I've checked. They're still in the room downstairs. Bring me to Princess Linglong's injuries first," Yu Qianqiu said with a smile. "Please." The couple extended their hands in unison and accompanied him quickly into the room. Once they entered the room, the Snow Emperor immediately cast a soundproof barrier. Yu Qianqiu looked around the room. Compared to the guest room downstairs, there was an ice couch, an ice stool, and a dressing table. Princess Linglong was still lying on the ice couch with her eyes tightly shut, unconscious. He pointed and asked, "How is she?" The Snow Emperor, who had high hopes for him, explained in detail in a gentle voice. "My wife and I worked together to temporarily suppress the throbbing true samadhi fire in her body. However, it will flare up every day for the next 2 days. Only after suppressing those 2 times will the true samadhi fire lie dormant for a period of time. At that time, Linglong will wake up." "I see." Yu Qianqiu pinched his chin and looked at the unconscious Shui Linglong. He frowned and said, "What method did you use to suppress the true samadhi fire in her body?" This was a question he had asked outside, but did not get an answer. This time, he brought it up again in hopes of unraveling the secret. After all, the sharpness of the true samadhi fire was known throughout the 3 realms. How could not be interested in the fact that the two could suppress the true samadhi fire? The husband and wife looked at each other and seemed a little hesitant. After a moment of silence, the Snow Empress asked, "Yu Qianqiu, why do you want to help us?" Obviously, she was considering whether it was worth it for her to reveal that secret. "I want to make friends with you. You might not believe me if I put it this way, so I'll put it more bluntly." Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them and said with a smile, "If one day I need your help, I hope you can help me." The couple nodded slightly. Empress Shui smiled bitterly and said, "Your words are almost exactly the same as what Wang Qing said back then." Yu Qianqiu asked in surprise, "Did Wang Qing say that he needed your help?" Seeing the couple nodding again, Yu Qianqiu could not help but feel suspicious. A thought flashed through his mind, but he did not grasp it. He thought for a while and shook his head. "If it's your secret and you don't think it's convenient to say it, then don't say it. Let's take a look at Princess Linglong's injuries first. Where is the true samadhi fire suppressed in her body?" As if she had heard a doctor asking about her daughter's illness, the Snow Emperor said seriously, "There is no fixed location. It is usually hidden in her limbs and bones. It will only show up when it flares up. It appears in a different place every time. It's a shame that we can't find out where it is hidden with our cultivation." Yu Qianqiu was silent for a moment before he slowly said, "I'll say the ugly words first. I can only try my best. I don't have the slightest confidence that I can dispel the samadhi true fire in her body. I hope you're mentally prepared. Please don't blame me if I fail." "Of course." The Snow Emperor nodded. The Snow Empress said worriedly, "Nothing will happen, right?" "Don't worry, Snow Empress. Whether or not she can be cured, I will first ensure her safety. I will not forcefully cast the spell." After Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, he stepped onto the ice couch and helped Shui Linglong sit up in front of the couple's nervous gazes. The couple immediately understood what he was going to do. He was going to use the most serious method. The Snow Empress immediately helped her unconscious daughter to sit cross-legged. Yu Qianqiu sat cross-legged behind Shui Linglong and pressed his palms on her back. He calmed himself down and slowly closed his eyes. He quickly injected his divine sense into her body to check for any abnormalities. However, after combing through Shui Linglong's meridians and bones, as the Snow Empress said, he couldn't find any trace of the true Samadhi fire. He didn't know where it was hidden. After opening her eyes, the Snow Empress asked anxiously, "How is it?" The Snow Emperor pulled her back and said with a bitter smile, "Don't be anxious. Let him take his time." Yu Qianqiu frowned and thought for a while, then said, "I have to find a way to lure out the true Samadhi fire hidden in her body and observe it. Only then can I be sure if I have a way to get rid of it. I'm going to use a more dangerous method now. I'll force the blue fire into her limbs and bones, and even the fine parts of her meridians to search and lure it. I'll have to trouble the two of you to stay vigilant at all times. Don't let anyone disturb me. Don't let me be distracted. If anything happens, please let me know in advance so that I have time to slowly withdraw the blue fire." The couple was shocked when they heard this. Fire had a restraining effect on meditation, not to mention the blue fire. Furthermore, the blue fire had to be injected into the body of the meditation practitioner. Just think about it. The meridians in the human body were extremely delicate, and if an accident were to happen, that person would be crippled even if he didn't die. "Will this work?" the Snow Empress asked with a trembling voice. The Snow Emperor pulled her back again and said through gritted teeth, "Since he dares to do this, he must have the confidence. Don't disturb him. We'll do our best to protect him." The Snow Empress turned around and grabbed his arm. She was so nervous that her body was trembling. Yu Qianqiu was confident in his control of fire. Most importantly, he could control the temperature of the fire at any time. As long as there weren't too many disturbances, there wouldn't be any accidents if he was suddenly interrupted by an external force midway. Looking at the nervous Snow Empress, he couldn't be bothered to say anything else. He had to see what the true Samadhi fire looked like. The palms that were pressed on Shui Linglong's back shook slightly. Two lumps of bright blue flames that dyed the entire room enveloped his palms. Then, Shui Linglong's body seemed to have been splashed with oil. The blue fire spread throughout her body with a buzz and enveloped her entire body. The Snow Empress was so frightened that her heart almost jumped out of her throat. She was about to let out a scream when the Snow Emperor covered her mouth. The Snow Emperor shook his head and signaled her not to be rash. The two of them, who were abnormally nervous, watched for a while before they finally relaxed. They discovered that although their daughter was enveloped by the blue fire, there was nothing on her body. Not even a strand of her hair was burnt. They had seen people who were good at controlling fire, but that was only in terms of precision. They had never seen someone who could release fire without feeling any warmth. They even suspected that what Yu Qianqiu released was the blue fire of the true Samadhi fire. However, the terrifying aura that came from the blazing fire clearly told them that it was indeed the blue fire. Such exquisite control of fire made the two of them gasp in amazement. They couldn't help but have high hopes that Yu Qianqiu could cure their daughter's injuries. However, Yu Qianqiu, who had injected the blue fire into Shui Linglong's body, didn't think so. He used the blue fire to search every part of Shui Linglong's body. He didn't even let go of the private parts of her chest and lower body. However, he still couldn't find any trace of the true Samadhi fire. He couldn't figure out where the true Samadhi fire had been hidden. Logically, the Snow Emperor and the Snow Empress shouldn't have lied to him about this. However, the thing was clearly in her body. Why couldn't he find it? Just as he was puzzled, he suddenly seemed to feel that Shui Linglong's body was absorbing the energy of his blue fire. How could a meditative cultivator dare to absorb the energy of the blue fire? A thought flashed in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He immediately thought of a true Samadhi fire. His spirits rose, and he immediately observed carefully. After understanding the situation, he was slightly shocked. It wasn't Shui Linglong's body that was absorbing the energy of the blue fire. Instead, there was an unknown energy in her body. It was like a transparent net that filled Shui Linglong's body. The entire net was absorbing the energy of the blue fire to enrich itself. With his high sensitivity to fire, he could roughly guess the reason after a little careful analysis. It turned out that the unknown energy that was distributed like a transparent net was the true Samadhi fire. However, it was too weak now. It wasn't strong enough to reveal itself and cause trouble. It was absorbing the energy of the blue fire. Good. I'll let you eat until you're full. Let's see what you look like to be able to shake the three realms. Yu Qianqiu calmed himself down and observed silently. He allowed the energy of the blue fire to slowly dissipate. The husband and wife who were guarding Yu Qianqiu in the room saw that Yu Qianqiu's expression was sometimes confused, sometimes surprised, and sometimes smiling. They immediately understood that he had discovered something. The husband and wife held each other's hands tightly, hoping for a miracle to happen. After half a day, the blue fire that enveloped Shui Linglong's body began to quickly shrink back into Yu Qianqiu's palm. In the end, it completely disappeared into his hand. The husband and wife stared at him. Suddenly, Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes. He exclaimed in surprise, "What a powerful, true Samadhi fire. It actually has spirituality. No wonder it's the true Samadhi fire that shakes the three realms." "How is it?" Snow Empress asked with apprehension and anticipation. Snow Empress also looked at him anxiously. "I've already found its tracks. I spent a lot of effort to use the blue fire to lure it out." Yu Qianqiu looked at the husband and wife with a pained expression. He smiled bitterly as if he had paid a painful price. "This fellow's appetite is really big. It can actually swallow the energy of my blue fire. It absorbed quite a lot of my blue fire." Chapter 10:24. The husband and wife were anxious to know the final result, but when they heard him say this, the two could only bow to Yu Qianqiu. Snow Empress then cupped her fists and said, "Thank you, mister. How is Linglong?" Yu Qianqiu put down his hands that were pushing Shui Linglong's back and helped her lie down on the ice couch. He got off the bed and walked between the couple. He said with a serious expression, "To be honest, I'm still not confident that I can expel the Samadhi true fire." The husband and wife looked at each other and secretly exchanged glances. Both of them had witnessed Yu Qianqiu's miraculous technique of controlling fire. In addition, they had heard him say that he had found traces of the true Samadhi fire that they were unable to find with their cultivation. They immediately mistakenly thought that Yu Qianqiu wanted to use this as a bargaining chip to threaten them. Snow Empress pondered for a while and said, "If Mr. can cure my daughter's injury, I'll tell you anything I know." This was undoubtedly a condition. "As long as you cure my daughter's injury, I'll tell you all the secrets you want to know." However, he had to put it in a roundabout way. He couldn't help it since he had a request. Yu Qianqiu rejoiced in his heart when he heard this, but he knew that they were all people who were used to fighting and killing. For something like this that had no proof, they would fall out with each other at a whim. You wouldn't even have a place to complain. Besides, he showed off the blue fire in front of them. How could he do something that was worth losing? Yu Qianqiu's face darkened, and he said in a deep voice, "What kind of person do you think I am? I, Leaping Thousand Worries Bandit, have my own principles. I have my own bottom line. If I want something, I will fight for it myself. There's no need for you to beat around the bush and ask for charity." These words sounded quite unyielding, but if you thought about it quietly, it was as good as not saying anything. Thieves have morals? The couple were speechless. They didn't expect that taking the initiative to give in would anger him instead. Snow Empress immediately came out and smiled apologetically. "Mister, don't be angry. He was just eager to save his daughter. Forget it. Let's not talk about anything else now." Yu Qianqiu bluffed for a while and immediately changed the topic. He stared at Shui Linglong, who was on the ice couch, and said, "This Samadhi true fire is a little strange. It used a method of fusing with Princess Linglong's physical body to hide its tracks. Now, Princess Linglong is it, and it is Princess Linglong. That's why no one can find its tracks. If I didn't use the green fire to lure it, I probably wouldn't have been able to find it." Fused together? The Snow Empress cried out involuntarily. The Snow Emperor raised his hand to signal her not to panic. He frowned and asked, "How did this happen?" "I'm afraid this has something to do with the secret technique you and your wife used to suppress it. It became afraid of being suppressed, so it used another method to protect itself. That's why I said it has spirituality. But then again, if it wasn't for you and your wife suppressing it, I'm afraid Princess Linglong would have turned into ashes. It's not your fault." As Yu Qinshu spoke, he walked out from between the couple and walked to the other side of the ice couch. He looked at Shui Linglong, who had her eyes closed, and said, "To put it bluntly, it has already treated Princess Linglong as a human cauldron. When it is suppressed to the point where it can't do anything, it quietly lurks in Princess Linglong's body and slowly absorbs the energy in Princess Linglong's body. When it accumulates enough energy, it will immediately come out to cause trouble. This is also why it hibernates and explodes at times." After the couple understood the reason, they couldn't help but look at their tortured daughter with sorrow. At first, they thought that the Samadhi true fire would only explode occasionally. Who knew that it had been extracting the energy from their daughter's body day and night? As her parents, they were very worried. "Linglong," the Snow Empress suddenly cried out in grief. She sat sideways on the ice couch and hugged Shui Linglong's body as she sobbed. The Snow Emperor's tightened lips slowly relaxed. She cupped her hands at Yu Qinshu and said, "Thank you, Mister, for clearing up my doubts. Since Mister has already understood the Samadhi true fire, I believe you have a solution." Upon hearing this, the Snow Empress immediately seemed to go crazy. She stood up in an instant and directly knelt down in front of Yu Qinshu. Yu Qinshu was slightly shocked. He still had this bit of reaction speed. He immediately stretched out his hands and held her arms. The plump feeling in his hand and the delicate fragrance that assailed his nostrils didn't make him have any improper thoughts. He was only moved by the pitiful heart of a parent. He smiled bitterly and said, "Madam, why do you have to do this? Yu Qinshu can't bear it. Quickly get up. If Mister doesn't promise to cure my daughter, I will kneel wherever Mister goes." The Snow Empress half knelt in the air and cried. The flirtatious expression that she used to tease Yu Qinshu previously was nowhere to be seen. The Snow Emperor stood at the side with his lips tightly shut and didn't speak. "Damn it, she's my army." Yu Qinshu didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The action of lifting her up had almost turned into carrying her. The other party's plump chest was already pressed against his abdomen. Without her cultivation, he couldn't carry her. As her husband, he didn't even care. "Madam, quickly get up. Although I can't guarantee that I can cure her, I promise to do my best." As he spoke, he looked at the Snow Emperor with a bitter expression and said, "Quickly persuade Madam. If I can't do it, there's no use even if you force me to death. I've already promised to do my best. What more do you want?" Hearing him say this, the Snow Emperor hurriedly carried his wife. This old woman is really strong. Yu Qinshu shook his slightly numb arm and asked doubtfully, "Based on the love you and your wife have for your daughter, you must have found an expert to treat Princess Linglong. What do they say?" The Snow Emperor hugged his wife, shook his head slightly and sighed. "Of course we did. For this matter, I even personally went to the Underworld Royal Palace and found the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. I told Bai Qi that if he could save my daughter, I and my wife were willing to submit to him. Only then did I convince him. He personally came to the Ice Palace to treat Linglong, but there was nothing he could do." It seemed that this couple was quite influential to be able to invite the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, who in the immortal realm could invite the immortal Emperor, Jin Tai. Yu Qinshu exclaimed, "Didn't Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, say anything else?" "Yes." There was a flash of hesitation on the Snow Emperor's face, but he didn't hide it and said happily, after Bai Qi examined Linglong, he said that there were only two ways to save her. One was to find an expert who cultivated the Samadhi true fire to expel or absorb the Samadhi true fire in Linglong's body. The other was to find the fire spirit of the five spirits of heaven and earth, who could also expel or absorb the Samadhi true fire. Aside from these two methods, there shouldn't be any other way in the three realms, unless we can find an expert from the immortal realm to forcefully cure her. After saying this, he left with an apologies and left. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The 5 spirits of heaven and earth. But not long ago, Bai Qi personally sent another message. The Snow Emperor continued with a helpless expression. Bai Qi said that there is someone who might have a way to expel the Samadhi true fire in Linglong's body. Oh! Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses, and his eyes lit up. I heard that there are some existences in the netherworld who rarely show their faces, but are even more terrifying than Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi. Could it be them? Seeing the Snow Emperor shake her head, he asked curiously, could it be the immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who once fought with Fire Virtue Immortal Lord? That's not it either. If it is Jin Tai, then it will be easy. The Snow Emperor sighed. You should have heard of a madman from the mortal world. He broke into the netherworld royal palace alone, defeated the silver-armored army of the underworld general, and then fought the 4 underworld generals together without losing. In the end, he was severely injured by Bai Qi and had to flee. Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched. He was too familiar with that person. He couldn't help but ask weakly, is it that person called Bai Changchun? But he was severely injured by Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, in 3 moves. Even Bai Qi was helpless against the Samadhi true fire. How could he have a way? AI, that's him. The Snow Emperor sighed slightly and said, back then, I had the same doubts as you. Bai Qi said that this person's cultivation was different. He could control wind, fire, thunder, lightning, snow, rain, wind, frost, and all the other natural phenomena. This meant that he had a deep understanding of the various powers of heaven and earth, and was able to control them with ease. Otherwise, with his cultivation, he wouldn't have been able to escape my pursuit. The Samadhi true fire could render everyone helpless, but in this person's eyes, it was probably nothing. Yu Qianqiu subconsciously touched his face and said, is that person as exaggerated as Bai Qi made him out to be? I also felt that it was not very possible. I even suspected that Bai Qi wanted to use me to track that person down. But after thinking about it, I know that although Bai Qi has many ways of handling people, he is also a proud person. He wouldn't lie for a defeated opponent. The Snow Emperor looked at his wife who was biting her lips in his arms and shook his head. But that person was chased by Bai Qi into the forbidden area of the netherworld. We don't even know if he is dead or alive. Moreover, Bai Qi didn't dare to barge in. It's not that I'm afraid of death. AI, let's not talk about these useless things. Mister, please do your best. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu smiled bitterly. Hearing this, he was even less confident in his method of rescue. He shook his head and said, I've been gone for too long. I have to go down and tell the others. Otherwise, if Grey Cloud Xin sees that I haven't returned, he will definitely make a big fuss. It might affect our rescue later. After all, my life now involves his life and the safety of the entire Heartless Palace. I understand. The Snow Emperor nodded and comforted his wife. He stretched out his hand and said, please. Then, he accompanied Yu Qianqiu and went out. The 2 of them had just arrived downstairs when they bumped into Grey Cloud Xin, who was leading Shun Yu and Ding Xiang to the main hall with a gloomy face. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu was safe and sound, Grey Cloud Xion's expression finally became better. However, when a few of them saw the Snow Emperor and Yu Qianqiu coming together from the back palace, and their attitude was easygoing, they were a little surprised. They didn't know what had happened. Old Song, you guys stay here for a while. I have some things to ask the Snow Emperor. After this matter is settled, we will leave immediately. Yu Qianqiu walked in front of the few of them and said with a smile. The Snow Emperor nodded at the side, indicating that he would let everyone leave. Chapter 1025. In this way, it instantly caused all of them to be filled with suspicions, and they all muttered in their hearts. What exactly is Yu Qianqiu doing by staying with the Snow Empress behind everyone's back? After exchanging greetings, Yu Qianqiu and the Snow Empress exchanged a meaningful glance. The two of them were about to return to the upper floor of the harem when they suddenly heard the sound of someone flying over and descending. The few of them looked outside, but they didn't see anyone. However, they heard the voice of a woman speaking respectfully from outside. Junior Li requests to see the Snow Empress. Yu Qianqiu and the others felt the voice was familiar. When they heard the surname Li, their expressions became unnatural. They guessed that it was the people from the palace. They all thought that the people from the palace coming here probably had something to do with what everyone had done. Snow Empress looked at them and said calmly, "Come in." From her tone, she seemed to know the person. Outside the palace, a woman in black leisurely walked in. Her hair was tied up in a bun, and her expression was calm and tranquil. It was none other than the third princess of Li Palace that Yu Qianqiu and the others had seen before. They just didn't know that her name was Li. Lily couldn't help but be startled when she saw that there were so many people inside the Ice Palace. When she discovered that it was Yu Qianqiu and the others, her expression instantly changed. She stopped where she was and only continued to walk forward after a long while. She was the only friend of the princess of Ice Palace, Shui Linglong. The two often played together and could be counted as a frequent guest of the Ice Palace. He didn't come here to play with Shui Linglong, but because the inscription symbol that belonged to the crown prince, Li Zhong, suddenly cracked. This caused a huge uproar in the Li Palace, which meant that the crown prince, Li Zhong, was dead. After checking the location of Crown Prince Li Zhong's death, they found that he was in the center of the Snow Mountain. That was the territory of Snow Empress and Snow Emperor. Although Snow Emperor and Snow Empress would be rude to the people of the immortal world, they wouldn't do anything to the water tribe of the River Styx. Not to mention the relationship between Third Princess Li and Ice Palace's Shui Linglong. Logically speaking, the Ice Palace's people wouldn't lay their hands on the Crown Prince of the Palace. Therefore, they investigated why Crown Prince Li Zhong had gone to the Million Li Great Snow Mountain. In the end, Crown Prince Li Zhong's trusted subordinates reported in fear that because Crown Prince Li Zhong had been humiliated by Yu Qianqiu at the Dragon Transformation Sect, he could not swallow this resentment. So he secretly followed Yu Qianqiu and prepared to take revenge along the way. Li Guang was enraged. Although he hated Li Zhong for being narrow-minded and disappointing, it was still his son who had died. The cause of death still had to be investigated. However, the Great Snowy Mountain and the Netherworld River were adjacent to each other. The water tribe of the Netherworld River had long heard of the power of the Snow Emperor and the Snow Empress. In addition, the agreement between the Land Tribe and the Water Tribe prevented him from acting recklessly. As a result, he had Third Princess Li bring a group of elite soldiers from the Water Tribe of Li Palace to the interior of the Great Snow Mountain to investigate the cause of Crown Prince Li Zhong's death. Crown Prince Li Zhong's corpse, which had been split into two by Tsungyan Xian's sword, was found not far from the Netherworld River. The corpse had already been covered by a thick layer of snow, and there were traces of a fierce battle between the Ice Palace's Ice Soul Xian soldiers and the surroundings. Li ordered people to collect her brother's corpse and had everyone wait in the Netherworld River. Then, she came alone to visit the Ice Palace, hoping to obtain some information about her brother's death from the Snow Emperor, or to ask if there were any other suspicious people who had passed through the Great Snow Mountain. In short, she believed that the people of the Great Snow Mountain would not kill her brother. However, when she stepped into the Ice Palace and saw that Yu Qianqiu and the others were also behind her, she thought of the instructions of her brother's trusted subordinates and combined the cause and effect, immediately locked onto the murderer. However, Yu Qianqiu and the others were a group of sly fellows, and on the surface, they all acted as if nothing had happened. "Huh, the little girl is here." The Snow Emperor smiled calmly. Yu Qianqiu was as calm as a mountain, but Tsungyan Xian and the others were not very calm, because from the Snow Emperor's words, they could tell that both parties were old acquaintances, and they did not know if she would betray them. This junior greets the Snow Emperor. Li bowed. At the side, Yu Qianqiu clapped his hands and laughed. "Third Princess, it's really fate. To think that we would meet here again." "Oh, you know each other?" The Snow Emperor looked surprised. In reality, after listening to Tsungyan Xian's description of the Dragon Transformation Sect, And with Li Li's reaction just now, he had already guessed that both parties had met. Seeing the Snow Emperor's attitude, everyone immediately knew what was going on and glanced slightly at Yuqiancho. They did not know what potion he had fed the Snow Emperor, and instantly felt much more at ease. Yes, Li Li replied respectfully, and turned to ask calmly, so Senior Snow Emperor is also acquainted with them. The Snow Emperor chuckled, and pointed at Song Yun Xan. I'm old acquaintances with the Heartless Palace's Sect leader Wang Qing. They came to visit today, and this is the first time I have met them. I see. Li Li nodded indifferently. The Snow Emperor suddenly sighed. This girl is here to look for Linglong. Her old illness has relapsed, and I'm afraid she can't play with you anymore. Sister Linglong. Li Li's face was filled with discomfort, and then she calmed herself down. She cupped her hands and said, This junior is not here to look for Sister Linglong, but because my elder brother was killed in the Great Snow Mountain, and I am here to find the murderer under my father's orders. I would like to ask Senior Snow Emperor if you have found any suspicious people? There's such a thing? The Snow Emperor was surprised. Why don't I know? For the sake of his daughter's life, he could only put aside his daughter's friend. Li Li paused when she heard that. She recalled that there were traces of an intense battle with the Ice Soul Profound soldiers beside the river Styx. And how could the Snow Emperor not know? She immediately knew that she could not get any information from her. She slowly tilted her head to look at Yu Qiancho and the others, and asked indifferently, Have you seen the murderer who killed my elder brother? No. The few of them denied, and Yu Qiancho even frowned and said, Ever since we parted ways with you at the Dragon Transformation Gate, we have never seen your elder brother, let alone the murderer who killed your elder brother. Third Princess, I'm sorry for your loss. I believe that justice has long arms, and a murderer will be caught sooner or later. The few of them instantly felt that these words were a little tiresome, and the corner of gray, Cloud Exine's mouth twitched. It was Yu Qiancho who asked him to kill, and now he was saying such nonsense again. Although he knew that these were perfunctory words, as the murderer, it was uncomfortable to hear. Ding Xiang and Shun Yu stole a glance at him, and they were amused. If that's the case, I won't disturb you anymore. Li Li nodded to the few of them, then bowed to the Snow Emperor and said, I'll come and see Sister Linglong after some time. Now, I still have to find the murderer who killed my elder brother, so I'll take my leave now. My condolences, I won't see you off. The Snow Emperor stretched out her hand and said. The few of them watched as Li Li slowly walked to the door. Suddenly, she turned around and stared at Shun Yu with a frosty face. She said sternly, Shun Yu, you really didn't see who killed my elder brother? Shun Yu was originally a lonely wandering water tribe in the river Styx. He had always been a coward who bullied the kind and feared the evil. When Li Li suddenly said that, he was so scared that he almost spoke incoherently. Yu Qiancho immediately kicked him and shouted coldly, Third Princess is asking you a question. Why are you in a daze? Shun Yu staggered from the kick and immediately came back to his senses. He bowed and replied, Third Princess, I really didn't see it. Li Li stared at him coldly for a while, then slowly walked out of the palace door without saying a word. She turned into a stream of light and flew away. I didn't expect this gentle and quiet girl to have this side to her. It seems that she has noticed something. The Snow Emperor's gaze swept across the few of them and finally landed on the ashen-faced Shinyu. He couldn't figure out why the water Styx would mix with the people of the celestial world and be so afraid of Yu Qiancho. Who cares what she saw? This matter was started by Li Zhong. There's no reason that he can't allow others to retaliate when he kills. It's fine if she knows what's good for her, but if she dares to keep pestering me, don't blame me for annihilating the entire River Styx Black Carp clan one day. A trace of haze flashed across Yu Qiancho's face. He turned and said to the Snow Emperor, Let's continue our business. The Snow Emperor was stunned, then nodded. The two of them walked towards the depths of the Ice Palace under the suspicious gaze of Tsungyan Exen and the others back in the room above. The Snow Empress, who had calmed down, asked in confusion, Is that girl Li Li here? That girl doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She came here to show off her talent, but she's already gone. Ignore her. The Snow Emperor snorted and looked at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu also calmed down and looked at the couple with a burning gaze. Although I can't guarantee that I can cure Princess Linglong, I hope that what you see during the process can rot in your stomach. Otherwise, I won't let the three of you go. I hope you don't think I'm joking. The couple looked at each other, not knowing why he said such a serious thing. What they were going to see must be very important. The Snow Emperor said solemnly, "Don't worry about this. We can abide by the rules here and stand aloof from worldly affairs. We are not heartless people." This was what Yu Qianqiu wanted. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to expose the blue flame in front of them. He didn't say anything else and stepped onto the ice couch again. Just as he helped Shui Linglong sit properly, the Snow Empress immediately helped her daughter sit properly. He sat behind Shui Linglong and calmed down. Then, he pressed his palms on Shui Linglong's back. He first used his divine sense to check the condition of Shui Linglong's body. Then, he pressed his palms on Shui Linglong's back. His palms shook slightly, and 2 balls of dancing black flames appeared on his palms. A cold aura and a thick deathly aura spread. Black flame. The couple's pupils contracted, and they exclaimed in shock. Yu Qianqiu suddenly opened his eyes and stared at the couple. The couple immediately understood that they had disturbed him. They were embarrassed. They begged him to save their daughter, but they were the ones who ruined things. How embarrassing. Yu Qianqiu closed his eyes, and the black flame quickly engulfed Shui Linglong. The couple immediately held each other's hands excitedly. This was beyond their expectations. They didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to have not only the blue flame of the Samadhi true fire, but also the black flame that separated the yin and yang realms. Chapter 1026. In this way, the husband and wife were more confident that Yu Qianqiu could cure their daughter. How could they not be excited? The black fire in Shui Linglong's body was silent. After waiting for a while, the hidden true Samadhi fire did not come out to absorb the energy of the black fire. The room was also silent. Yu Qianqiu placed his palms on Shui Linglong's back and focused on the movement in her body. He believed that the true Samadhi fire would come out again. With his sensitivity to fire, he could faintly feel that something was stirring in Shui Linglong's body. The husband and wife held their breath and stared at Yu Qianqiu, not daring to breathe too loudly. They hoped to see some clues from Yu Qianqiu's face. However, Yu Qianqiu's expression was as calm as stagnant water. They couldn't see anything. After a full 2 hours, the two of them finally saw a sly smile from the corner of Yu Qianqiu's mouth, and they almost wanted to open their mouths to ask how it was. The true Samadhi fire hidden in Shui Linglong's body finally couldn't resist the temptation and appeared. It was like a huge net covering Shui Linglong's body. It quietly appeared in every meridian in her body. It was invisible and formless. Even divine senses couldn't detect it. However, Yu Qianqiu, who had filled Shui Linglong's meridians with the black fire, could easily sense its existence. After the invisible net appeared, it stayed still for a while. It was probably afraid of being suppressed by the husband and wife. After confirming that there was no danger, the ends of each branch wriggled slightly and began to extract the black fire's energy. It was as if they were drinking to their heart's content. Knowing that it was still vigilant, Yu Qianqiu didn't dare to disturb it. It was already deeply rooted in Shui Linglong's body. It had almost spread to every corner of Shui Linglong's body. Even though Yu Qianqiu cultivated the fire technique, he wasn't confident that he could completely remove it from Shui Linglong's body. For Shui Linglong's safety, he could only play a little game with it step by step. Yu Qianqiu had absorbed enough energy from the green fire, and the energy from the black fire was almost at the edge of its mouth. Yu Qianqiu was prepared to feed at the purple fire later. Half a day later, the invisible net stopped absorbing the black fire's energy and went back into Shui Linglong's body. Yu Qianqiu knew that it had absorbed enough and began to retract the remaining black flames. Just as he opened his eyes, he heard the Snow Empress asking anxiously, "Sir, how is it?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them and smiled. He replied, I was thinking, since you and your wife have a way to suppress it, I believe that if I lure it to a place, you can also trap it. The couple looked at each other and understood that the it Yu Qianqiu was referring to was the true Samadhi fire. The Snow Empress frowned and said, It should be possible, but the key is to completely separate it from Ling Long's physical body. Otherwise, my wife and I will be afraid to take action. You should know that every time we heavily injured it, we couldn't kill it because we were afraid of hurting Ling Long. I will think of a way. Yu Qianqiu told the two of them seriously. This time, I need your cooperation. Inject your consciousness into Ling Long's body and hide it in her dantian. I will think of a way to draw it into her dantian. Remember, don't act rashly. Wait for my notice. Once you receive my notice, immediately trap it in Ling Long's dantian. Don't let it have a chance to come into contact with Ling Long's physical body. I will think of a way to absorb it. How is it? Do you understand what I mean? His intention was very clear. The two of them weren't fools and naturally understood what he meant. Both of them nodded excitedly. They stepped onto the ice couch and sat cross-legged on either side of Ling Long. They each placed a hand on Ling Long's left and right shoulders. After a while, the couple said with a serious expression, We can begin. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. His palms are pressed on Shui Ling Long's back shook slightly. Two balls of purple flames suddenly burned on his palms. The terrifying aura that made one's heart palpitate almost made the couple tremble. The Snow Emperor and Snow Empress widened their eyes and couldn't help but exclaim, Purple flames! Calm your mind, Yu Qianqiu said plainly and closed his eyes. The couple looked at each other in shock. They finally understood why Yu Qianqiu had warned them to keep what they saw to themselves. Otherwise, he wouldn't let the three of them off. Imagine how many people in the immortal realm and netherworld would think of ways to get rid of him once this news was spread. Especially immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who had tasted the power of fire virtue, immortal lord. He would be the first to not let Yu Qianqiu off. A trace of emotion flashed in the couple's eyes. After living for so many years, it had been a long time since they saw someone who could move them. In order to help them, he had even sacrificed his life. They owed him a huge favor, no matter if it succeeded or not. As long as the couple still had a conscience, they couldn't let him down. The couple sighed and closed their eyes. But when they saw the purple flames in their daughter's meridians, which were like the roots of an old tree, they were shocked again. Not to mention such a powerful fire control technique. Just the energy consumption was not small. It undoubtedly proved that Yu Qianqiu was really trying his best. Little did they know that for Yu Qianqiu, who could control thousands of swords at the same time, although it was strenuous, it wasn't a big deal. The purple flames in Shui Ling Long's body were silent. Yu Qianqiu could feel the restlessness of the fellow hidden in Shui Ling Long's body. Perhaps excitement was more appropriate to describe it. Because of this, Yu Qianqiu was more confident that he could take care of this fellow. He couldn't help but smile. As long as it was to your liking, it was fine. However, the hidden fellow still maintained his vigilance. Although it was restless, it still refused to show itself. After almost an hour, it began to quietly appear from Shui Ling Long's body. After confirming that there was no danger, it hurriedly wrapped around the purple flames and madly absorbed them. But this time, the absorption wasn't as smooth. Unlike the blue and black flames, Yu Qianqiu didn't let it absorb the purple flames. Instead, he increased the control of the purple flames so that the energy contained in the purple flames wouldn't be absorbed so easily. But it was obvious that the purple flames were much more tempting to it than the blue and black flames. Although the amount of purple flames it absorbed was negligible, it couldn't help but want more. Bit by bit, it increased the absorption of the purple flames. At the same time, Yu Qianqiu mischievously increased the control of the purple flames so that it wouldn't be able to freely absorb the purple flame's energy. The invisible net of energy bit even tighter. When started to bite the purple flames without any restraint, Yu Qianqiu's lips curled into a smile. With Shui Linglong's dantian as the center, The purple flames that radiated to all the meridians in her limbs and bones started to slowly shrink towards her dantian. The stalemate between the two sides was slowly shrinking. Every time the net was a little discouraged, Yuchincho would release a little more purple flames for it to absorb. Immediately, it would crazily bite and not let go. Once it was bitten, Yuchincho wouldn't let go. He was afraid that it would run away after being fed. Like fishing, he slowly pulled the net out of Shuel Linglong's limbs and bones after spending a lot of effort. The purple flames finally lured this fellow to the vicinity of her dantian. The couple couldn't feel the true samadhi fire. Although they didn't know how the situation was progressing, they realized that most of the purple flames were already gathered near her dantian. They knew that a good show was about to begin. Otherwise, Yuchincho wouldn't play such a senseless game right under their noses. They immediately concentrated and prepared. Although the true samadhi fire only had some ignorant spirituality, it could still be considered to have some spirituality. After biting the purple fire and piercing half of its head into the dantian, it was immediately slightly startled and immediately let go. It hit at the entrance and hesitated endlessly, as if it had felt a trace of danger. However, at this moment, the small ball of purple flames in her dantian stretched out a small section of its tail and swayed outside her dantian. The abundant purple flame's energy was leisurely volatilizing. Such arrogance was really intolerable. The invisible and invisible true samadhi fire suddenly pounced on it and bit it without letting go. It crazily absorbed the purple flame's energy. That small section of purple flames was like a startled rabbit. The purple flames that were volatilizing quickly retracted, and with a whoosh, it pulled the true samadhi fire into her dantian. The purple flames condensed into a purple pearl in her dantian. The true samadhi fire that ran in her dantian hugged it and sucked it with all its might. Most of its body was still outside. This was not easy to deal with. Yuchincho knew that if he didn't completely lure it in from the surrounding bodies, it would be completely useless. Even if the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress severely injured it, it could still hide in Shuel Linglong's body to slowly recover its strength. This was completely treating the symptoms but not the root cause. Yuchincho immediately adopted a more flexible method of luring it. He appropriately controlled the purple pearl's energy loss. Every time more true samadhi fire entered his dantian, the purple flame's energy loss would be a little faster. The more that entered, the faster the purple flame's energy loss would be. Finally, the true samadhi fire that was hooked into surrounding bodies couldn't bear it anymore. It all entered his dantian and wrapped around the purple pearl tightly. It used all its strength to absorb the purple flames. Yuchincho was secretly delighted, but he didn't inform the couple to close the door and beat them. He wanted to see what the true samadhi fire looked like, so he released the purple flame's energy for it to absorb. Not long after, a thin layer of three-colored light appeared around the soybean-sized purple ball. A weak flame that was a mixture of green, black, and purple wrapped around the purple ball and rose up. As it absorbed more and more purple fire energy, the color of the flame became more and more distinct. So this was the true samadhi fire. It didn't look like much. Yuchincho was astonished. He didn't expect that the true samadhi fire that covered Shuel Linglong's body like a net could fuse together into such a small wisp, but it could take so long. At this moment, the Snow Emperor's surprised voice sounded in his ear. "Not bad, that's it. Can we start?" The true samadhi fire had already appeared. If he continued to hide it, it would be hard to explain if any accidents happened. Yuchincho paused, then decisively transmitted his voice to the couple. "Start." Chapter 10:27. In an instant, the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress worked together. Two beams of white light flashed and formed a transparent ice crystal ball in Shuel Linglong's dantian. The cold air trapped the purple pearl and the wisp of true samadhi fire inside. Yuchincho suddenly felt a chill in his palm. He immediately realized that Shui Linglong had been frozen into an ice cube. He couldn't help but be shocked. He opened his eyes and looked at the couple. He realized that they were not moving. He knew that his worries were unnecessary. He continued to use his divine sense to observe what was happening inside. The true Samadhi fire was happily sucking on the purple pearl. It suddenly realized that its surroundings had changed. The burning flame suddenly stopped. It realized that it was the thing that had almost turned it into nothingness many times. It instantly panicked. The flame trembled violently. It dashed around, but it couldn't break through the layer of ice crystal ball. They finally trapped this damn thing. The couple opened their eyes excitedly. They looked at Yu Qianzhou with gratitude. The Snow Empress was very excited. "Mister, what do we do next?" Yu Qianzhou closed his eyes and nodded. "You just need to trap it. Leave the rest to me." The couple nodded and closed their eyes to observe what was happening inside their daughter's body. The purple pearl in Shui Linglong's dantian suddenly rotated slowly. The true Samadhi fire that had brushed past, it suddenly shrunk to the side of the ice crystal as if it had seen a ghost. The flame trembled and seemed to be extremely afraid. However, the space sealed by the ice crystal was only so big. It had nowhere to hide, even if it wanted to. It could only feel a strong suction force sucking away the energy in its body. As the purple pearl rotated faster and faster, the energy in its body was quickly drained away. It found that its body that had been strengthened with great difficulty was becoming weaker and weaker. "Little fellow, do you think you can eat my stuff so easily? Spit it out with interest no matter how much you eat." Yu Qianzhou laughed coldly in his heart. He could clearly feel that his purple fire pearl was becoming stronger and stronger. The Snow Empress and her husband were also excited. They could feel that the energy of the Samadhi true fire was being rapidly absorbed by the purple pearl. The strange tricolored flame was becoming smaller and smaller. It was shivering inside, but it had nowhere to run. In a short while, it had shrunk to the size of a bean. Everyone felt that the end of the little fellow had arrived. However, what surprised everyone was that when the little fellow was almost absorbed until it was only the size of spark, it suddenly shot towards the ice crystal like a shooting star. With a duh sound, it pierced through the ice crystal and instantly disappeared into the wall of Shui Linglong's dantian. Ran away. The three of them shuddered and opened their eyes at the same time. They looked at each other. Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched and his face darkened. He said in a low voice, "Can any of you explain to me what's going on? Didn't you say you could trap it? Could it be that you're playing with me on purpose?" What he wanted to absorb was not the energy of the Samadhi true fire, but the spiritual consciousness. He wanted to absorb it and study it properly. He wanted to see if he could fuse it into his own Samadhi true fire in advance. He was about to succeed, but this accident happened. Now, all his previous efforts were wasted. He couldn't help but be angry. The husband and wife were already dumbfounded. After being at a loss for a while, they both slowly withdrew the white light into their palms. They slowly lowered their arms and stood there in silence. Following that, an extremely vexed expression appeared on their faces. Yu Qianzhou withdrew the purple flame. The muscles on his face squirmed. He looked around and said, "Who can explain to me what this means?" He patted Shui Linglong, who was already frozen into an ice statue. "Sigh." The Snow Empress let out a long sigh and said with endless melancholy, "We were too careless. We thought that the little bastard had already accepted its fate and had no way to escape. Who would have thought that I would be paralyzed by its trembling appearance, allowing it to escape through the gap between our ice spirit harmony with its tiny body?" A very melodramatic reason, but Yu Qianzhou knew that he wasn't lying to him. The husband and wife wouldn't joke around with their daughter's life. The corner of Yu Qianzhou's mouth curled up into a cold smile. He gradually laughed out loud. He stood up and looked down at the family of three. He sneered and said, "A sin caused by heaven can be forgiven, but a sin caused by oneself cannot be escaped." This saying is completely right. I saw a huge joke, but this joke isn't funny at all. There's still a chance. The Snow Empress suddenly seemed to have woken up from a dream. She pounced over and hugged onto Yu Chincho's legs. She squeezed out an extremely forced smile on her terrified face. She raised her head and looked at Yu Chincho, almost begging. Mister, let's try one more time. Lure it out again. This time, we definitely won't let it escape again. You've seen its spirituality with your own eyes. Do you think you can use the same method to lure it out again? Yu Chincho stood coldly on the ice couch. He lowered his head slightly and looked at the forced smile that was hugging onto his legs. He heartlessly shattered her dream and said, if it was so easy to lure it out, then it wouldn't be the Samadhi true fire. It would be a stupid fire that can't even be compared to firewood for cooking. No, the Snow Empress couldn't accept this fact. She hugged onto Yu Chincho's legs tightly and begged with a trembling voice, there's still a chance. There's still a way. I know that, mister. You definitely have a way. Can you try one more time? I promise that this time, I definitely won't let it escape again. I beg you to try one more time. Sigh. The Snow Emperor let out another long sigh. He stood up and forcefully carried his wife away. He dragged her under the ice couch and said dejectedly, Mister is right. It won't be tricked a second time. Think of another way. No. The Snow Empress let out a heart-wrenching scream. Tears flowed down her face. She stretched out an arm and scratched at Yu Chincho, who was standing on the ice couch with his hands clasped behind his back. It seemed like she wanted to grab Yu Chincho and try again. Yu Chincho stood quietly with his hands clasped behind his back. He looked at her coldly without the slightest emotion. He didn't move at all and didn't show any sympathy. The Snow Emperor shook his head weakly while hugging her. He emptied one of his hands towards his daughter, who was frozen stiff on the ice couch. He opened his fingers slightly and immediately sucked in a gust of cold air from his daughter's body. Shuelinglong thawed on the spot and fell back softly. Yu Chincho, who originally wanted to be indifferent, bent over to help her up. He slowly let her lie on the ice couch, and then he flashed under the ice couch. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Shuelinglong let out a moan. Her eyelids moved as if she wanted to open her eyes. The three of them looked over. They didn't expect her to wake up so quickly, but after thinking about it, they understood. Normally, the true Samadhi fire would act up twice in 2 days, and Shuelinglong would only wake up after being suppressed for 2 more times. However, a large amount of the true Samadhi fire's energy was extracted by Yu Chincho this time, and it was almost eradicated. Its vitality was greatly damaged, and it probably wouldn't have the ability to stir up trouble in a short period of time. Linglong, the Snow Empress, finally let out a surprised cry in the midst of her sorrow. The Snow Empress immediately squeezed out a smile and said, take care of Linglong first. I'll go discuss with Mister if there's any way to completely get rid of the true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body. The Snow Empress obediently agreed, then broke free from her husband's embrace. She bowed to Yu Chincho and said, please, mister. Then, she hurriedly climbed onto the couch. Her daughter was still the most important. The Snow Empress smiled bitterly and shook her head. She extended her hand and gestured to Yu Chincho outside the door, and the two of them slowly walked out. Both of them didn't say a word all the way from upstairs to downstairs. Unknowingly, the two of them walked to the main entrance of the ice palace. On the ice cliff, there were various colored ice sculptures that formed a neon glow, and it was exceptionally eye-catching in the pitch-black netherworld. No one knew when it started snowing again. The wind was light, but the heavy snowflakes fluttered in the air. The footprints left on the ice cliff had already been covered by the snow. This place was supposed to be cleaned from time to time. For the Snow Empress and her family, clearing the snow was a piece of cake, but they were delayed by some matters. The Snow Emperor wasn't in the mood to clear the accumulated snow on the ice cliff. The two of them walked on the snow side by side in the neon lights that reflected each other. Every step they took left a deep footprint in the snow, emitting a dull, crunching sound, just like the mood of the two of them. Under the guidance of the Snow Empress, the two of them slowly walked into a colorful pavilion. They wanted to avoid the falling snow, but the snow was carried in by the wind from time to time, and there was already snow in the pavilion. The Snow Empress casually set up a soundproof enchantment. She looked at the white light between the undulating mountains under the night sky and sighed. Sorry to trouble you. Yu Qianshou, on the other hand, silently stared at an icicle that supported the pavilion. There were quite a few ice souls inside. He did not reply because he had lost a chance to understand the Samadhi true flame. He was somewhat unhappy. Do you have any other way to get rid of the true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body? The Snow Empress retracted her gaze and tilted her head to look at Yu Qianshou. She was carefully observing his expression. I have the 3 mystical flames that can fuse with the true Samadhi fire. You've seen it. Yu Qianshou let out a sigh of relief. Thinking that he didn't lose anything, he cheered up a little and smiled. When I fuse the 3 mystical flames into the true Samadhi fire, I'm sure I can easily get rid of the problem in Princess Linglong's body. The Snow Empress shook her head and smiled bitterly. From what I know, to fuse with the true Samadhi fire, you need to be at least an immortal emperor, but now. He didn't have the confidence to continue. It's a little too long. Didn't the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi say that there's a fire spirit among the 5 spirits of heaven and earth that can save Princess Linglong? Yu Qianshou looked at her and smiled. Maybe I'm lucky enough to find that fire spirit. Find the fire spirit? The Snow Empress was startled and shook her head slightly. Easier said than done. Wanting to meet the 5 spirits of heaven and earth is like looking for a needle in a haystack. You can only follow your fate. You can't force it. How come I've never heard of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth? Yu Qianshou looked at her and frowned. Can you tell me what's going on? Chapter 1028. Some things just happened when the conditions were right. They couldn't be forced. Yu Qianshou had racked his brains just to make sure that the conditions were right. Now that the conditions were right, the Snow Emperor didn't hide it like before and only paused for a moment. The 5 spirits of heaven and earth have always existed in the legends. It is said that they are 5 spiritual beings born from heaven and earth, each with extraordinary talents and abilities. The Snow Emperor looked at the night sky and said slowly, Originally, I only heard of the existence of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth by chance, but I didn't know which 5 spirits they were. Later, because of Linglong's matter, I asked the Emperor of the Underworld, by Qi, to confirm the existence of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. They're the water spirit, the fire spirit, the metal spirit, the wood spirit, and the earth spirit. Yu Qianshou was surprised to hear this. Why did it coincide with the 5 elemental arts that he had comprehended? He scratched his face and asked suspiciously, What form do the 5 spirits of heaven and earth exist in? Are they very powerful? I can't be sure what their forms are. They are spiritual beings born from the 5 elements of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth. Some of them are still spiritual beings and haven't formed a fixed form. But once they have a foundation, they should all transform into human forms to cultivate. As for how powerful they are, it depends on how deep their cultivation is. The Snow Emperor said while thinking. It seemed that he didn't know much. So he suddenly asked, Do you think the immortal Emperor Jintai of your immortal world is powerful? Immortal Emperor Jintai? Of course he's powerful. Otherwise, how could he rule the immortal world? Yu Qianshou was shocked. He stared at the Snow Empress, dumbfounded. After a while, he stuttered, Yimis. The Snow Emperor looked at him and nodded with a smile, undoubtedly telling him that he had guessed correctly. Yu Qianshou swallowed and calmed his emotions. Jintai, his surname is Jin. Is he the metal spirit of the 5 spirits of heaven? That's right. It's good that you know this, but don't tell anyone else. Otherwise, if Jintai finds out, he might harm you. I suspect that even by Qi, the Emperor of the Underworld, doesn't know about Jintai's background, the Snow Emperor said. Hearing this news, Yu Qianshou rubbed his palms excitedly. It was not because he had learned this big secret, but because he was sure that he had 1 or 2 friends in the middle stage of the Underworld Emperor realm. This was something that couldn't be bought with money. The risk he had taken previously had finally paid off. But then he was stunned. He intertwined his fingers together as if he had thought of something. He asked suspiciously, since even the Emperor of the Underworld, by Qi, couldn't see through Jean Tai's background. How did you know? Hee hee. I knew you would ask this question. Since you are honest with me, I won't hide it from you. The Snow Emperor laughed. After the Snow Emperor laughed, endless emotions surged on her face. She waved her arm and pointed to the vast land under the curtain of night, and said with great emotion, "Back then, my wife and I were chased by our enemies, and were forced to enter this snow region, which was extremely dangerous at that time. Just when my wife and I were seriously injured and on the verge of death, who knew that by chance, the two of us in an ice abyss unexpectedly swallowed a pair of ice spirits that were born from the snow region of the vast ice plains." Ice spirits? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. Aren't the 5 spirits of heaven and earth, water, fire, metal, wood, and earth? How come there is an ice spirit? Yes, it is an ice spirit. The Snow Emperor nodded with a smile. It is a great fortune to encounter an ice spirit, but my wife and I encountered a pair of ice spirits, a male and a female. Because of this, we both escaped from death. If this is not God's will, then what is? It is also because of this fortuitous encounter that my wife and I have the achievements we have today. Really good luck. Why can't I encounter it? Yu Qianqiu smacked his lips and said with a face full of envy. He wasn't pretending, but he was really envious. This was called possessing a mountain of treasures without realizing it. Didn't he think about how he had only cultivated from a mortal to an immortal in a mere few decades? Although the Snow Empress and her husband had obtained the ice spirit, they had spent tens of thousands of years to reach their current cultivation. He didn't know it was a blessing in disguise. However, envious was envious. He asked in confusion, "But what does this have to do with Jean Tai being a metal spirit?" Spiritual chi, that kind of unique spiritual chi bore in the world, and is different from any spiritual chi in the 3 realms. The Snow Emperor revealed an expression of reminiscence and said, "That was by chance, and was also the first time I met Jean Tai. From his body, I sensed a spiritual chi similar to the ice spirits, and immediately determined that he was some kind of spirit. Thinking of his surname and some observation, I confirmed that he was the metal spirit of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. There should be no mistake. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu nodded in understanding, but the doubt on his face didn't diminish. He asked doubtfully, "Didn't you say that there are only 5 spirits of heaven and earth? Why did the ice spirits come out?" According to the legends, there are indeed only 5 spirits. This shouldn't be wrong. According to my understanding, after absorbing the ice spirit may only be a branch of the water spirit. Maybe there are other spirits like the wind spirit or the lightning spirit in this world. I reckon that the 5 elements of water, fire, metal, wood, and earth are the orthodox ones. Of course, this is only my guess, and I can't be sure what's going on. The Snow Emperor muttered to herself and said her thoughts. There was a short silence in the pavilion, and both of them had their own thoughts. Under the quiet night sky, heavy snow swirled. With their cultivation, they could hear the rustling sound of falling snow in the surrounding snow. A gust of wind blew, and some drifting snowflakes were blown in. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand to catch a piece of feather-like snow. Watching it gradually melt in his palm, he frowned and said to himself, "With my current cultivation, it's impossible to melt the Samadhi true fire. It seems that to remove the Samadhi true fire in Ling Long's body, I can only find the fire spirit. But where should I find it? Even if I find it, I might not be able to invite it." The Snow Emperor treated him sincerely, and he now regarded the Snow Emperor as a friend. He began to seriously worry about Ling Long's injury. He was like this. He would repay a drop of water with a gushing spring, and on the other hand, he would seek revenge for the smallest grievance. He was very extreme. Hearing this, the Snow Emperor felt very gratified, and she faintly smiled and said, "Actually, the reason why my husband and I were able to devour the ice spirit by chance is related to the great ice law that we cultivate. And I can see that you are proficient in controlling fire, so it is easier for you to encounter the fire spirit. Maybe you can also devour the fire spirit. That way, You will also have a way to remove the samadhi true fire in Linglong's body. You mean that I can devour the fire spirit if I cultivate the fire art? Then if I cultivate the metal art, wouldn't I be able to devour the immortal Emperor Jin-Tai? Before he could finish, Yu Qianzhou's body shook, and he was stunned by his own words. The Snow Emperor slightly nodded and smiled. That's about it. But Jin-Tai won't be so easy to devour. The key is that his cultivation is too high. Plus, with Jin-Tai's personality, he won't let you devour him obediently. You have to defeat him first. However, there are also benefits to having a high cultivation. If you could devour Jin-Tai, then his cultivation will be transferred to you. Then, congratulations, you will become a late immortal emperor expert. Hee hee. Saying this, he couldn't help but laugh. He thought that Yu Qianzhou was just using Jin-Tai as an example, so he casually said this. How could he know that Yu Qianzhou was proficient in the metal art in addition to the fire art? Devour Jin-Tai. Jin-Tai's cultivation will be transferred to me? Yu Qianzhou's voice trembled as he asked. His heart was thumping wildly, and he couldn't suppress it no matter how hard he tried. His heart was thumping nonstop in his chest. He couldn't wait to take a dagger and stab it into his chest so that his heart would stop beating, so that he wouldn't be able to take it if it continued to beat. He was about to have high blood pressure. Of course, this is the truth, but I don't think anyone in the three realms has the ability to devour Jin-Tai. The Snow Emperor suddenly couldn't help but laugh. No matter how high Jin-Tai's cultivation is, you don't have the fortune to enjoy it. Why are you so excited? The key is that I have the fortune, but I don't have the fate. You can't understand the pain that I, your brother, can see but can't touch. Why do you have to say these damned words to me? I'll lose sleep. Yu Qianzhou walked out of the pavilion speechlessly. He raised his hands high and raised his head, allowing the icy snow to fall on his face to cool it down. It was as if he was asking the heavens for help. In his heart, he was begging heaven and earth, hoping that Bai Changchun was still alive. Because if he wanted to devour Jin-Tai's cultivation that could make people drool, he could only pin his hopes on Bai Changchun. Among the people he knew, perhaps only Bai Changchun, that super abnormal person, could defeat Jin-Tai. Then, as a disciple, he could bask in his master's glory, help his master clean up the battlefield, and eat Jin-Tai at the same time. This was a matter of course. The Snow Emperor naturally saw that something was wrong with this guy, and asked with a frown, "What's wrong?" Yu Qianzhou put down his hands, turned around, and walked back into the pavilion, and said solemnly to the Snow Emperor, "I went outside and thought about it calmly. Now I want to tell you that if I can fuse with the Samadhi true fire or devour the fire spirit, as long as there's a way, I will come back as soon as possible to remove the Samadhi true fire from Linglong's body." He felt that the information revealed by the Snow Emperor was worth the price. However, the Snow Emperor was stunned. Looking at his sincere expression and sincere eyes, she was a little choked and speechless. She began to figure out why he was so anxious about Linglong's injury. Could it be? She gritted her teeth and said tentatively, "It seems that you are very concerned about Linglong." Yu Qianzhou didn't think too much about it, and the flattery came out of his mouth. He patted his chest and said passionately, "Of course. From today onwards, your daughter is my niece. I will definitely find a way to relieve her pain." Chapter 1029. Niece. The Snow Emperor was stunned. He thought that Yu Qianzhou had taken a fancy to his daughter, but he didn't expect that he only saw her as his niece. Instantly, he heaved a sigh of relief. To men, some men could be brothers, or be sworn brothers who would lay down their lives for each other. That was a man's admiration for another man. No matter how many flaws they had, they couldn't hide their manly nature. But if he was asked to be his daughter's man, to be his son-in-law, no matter if he said it out loud, agreed, or stopped it, he wouldn't be too willing. Because only men would think that they understood the bad habits of men, just like how women could always see the many flaws of other women. Why? Don't you want to see me as a friend or brother? Yu Qianzhou pretended to be angry and said, Looks like I'm climbing up the social ladder. Don't. That's not what I mean. The Snow Emperor hurriedly waved his hand and responded, You and I should be brothers. I can't ask for more. Everyone had their own selfish motives, and everyone knew how to put on an act. For hands clasped together, you called him Big Brother Shue, and he called a brother you. After all the greetings, they were just short of kowtowing and becoming sworn brothers. Perhaps even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore. It was so disgusting that the snow didn't dare to fall anymore. The snow outside had stopped, but the cold winds still blew in from time to time. The snow has stopped. Yu Qinsho took the opportunity to pull his hand away from the Snow Emperor's hand. He held onto the ice pillar and glanced outside. The snow had stopped. Looking at the neon lights shining in the ice sculptures outside, he couldn't help but exclaim, Brother Snow, your ice soul is really amazing. I remember Ling Long showed her skill, and it really opened my eyes. The Snow Emperor waved his hand, and the snow on the ice table in the center of the pavilion was blown away. There were more than 10 ice souls in the ice layer on the table, and they were very beautiful. He touched the table and smiled, and said, These things are a little amazing in front of outsiders. They are the ice soul mystic soldiers of the Great Snow Mountain. The peace of the millions of miles of snow region is maintained by them. Ice soul mystic soldier, not a bad name. Yu Qinsho sat on the stool and leaned on the table to carefully observe the ice souls in the layer of ice. Other than the beautiful color, he couldn't find any clues. He looked around and clicked his tongue. It looks like you have close to 10,000 ice soul profound soldiers under you. Nearly 10,000? The Snow Emperor was startled and looked at Yu Qinsho, guessing that he wasn't pretending and really didn't know. He immediately laughed and said, Brother, you underestimate my strength too much. Although my cultivation isn't very high in the Netherworld, do you know why I can occupy the Great Snow Mountain for millions of miles in the Netherworld as my territory? Do you know why Fire Virtue Immortal Lord wanted to use my ice soul, profound ice, to fight against Immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Do you know why I can invite the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi here at any time? I don't know. Yu Qinsho shook his head weakly. Although he didn't know, he could feel the arrogance of a bastard from the Snow Emperor. One look, and he knew that the Snow Emperor was full of confidence. The close to 10,000 ice soul profound soldiers here are just for fun. The Snow Emperor pointed around, and then pointed majestically at the vast snowfield, and said proudly, I, the Snow Emperor, can be counted as one of the few overlords in the Netherworld. I have 800,000 ice soul profound soldiers at my command. Even Madame Hei Qi, the beloved concubine of Bai Qi, and her dark army under her command wouldn't dare to trespass here. Otherwise, I'll let her have a taste of my 800,000 ice soul profound soldiers. Yu Qinsho was shocked. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was shocked. 800,000 ice soul profound soldiers. Good heavens. You're not bluffing, right? He couldn't help but stand up and walk to the Snow Emperor's side. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the place where the Snow Emperor pointed, but he didn't see anyone. However, he thought that the Snow Emperor wouldn't boast in front of him and was just giving advice. Thinking of the scene where Xue Linglong casually threw out the ice soul profound soldiers, he sized up the Snow Emperor and said, Could it be that you have hundreds of thousands of subordinates with you at any time? There's no need for that. My wife and I don't fight with the world. If people don't offend us, we won't offend them. We maintain our powerful strength just to ensure that we can live a peaceful life. There's no need to carry them with us all the time. The Snow Emperor pointed around and said, Most of them are scattered and hidden under the boundless ice and snow, guarding this vast snowfield. There's also an advantage to this. By absorbing the energy from the ice and snow, their cultivation will increase steadily. However, the speed of improvement will be very slow compared to our cultivation speed. Their advantage is that they can slowly improve day and night without stopping. They can improve their cultivation by themselves. Yu Qinsho was shocked again and immediately asked, I really can't help it. How'd you get these ice soul profound soldiers? In fact, most of the higher-ups in the Netherworld knew some of the reasons. Although they didn't know much, it wasn't a secret. Therefore, the Snow Emperor didn't hide anything from him and told him directly, "Most of the Ice Soul mystic soldiers come from the original ghosts and demons or some meditation cultivators in the snow region. After my wife and I devoured and merged the ice spirits, we comprehended a great technique by chance. We called it the Xianming Soul refining technique. We captured them and erased their spiritual sense, then refined them into ice spirits and planted our spiritual sense imprints to control them. After my wife and I swept through the entire snowy region, we obtained hundreds of thousands of Ice Soul profound soldiers. After that, anyone who trespassed into this place would be captured and refined into Ice Soul profound soldiers. After so many years, we naturally accumulated these 800,000 people." Yu Qianqiu sucked in a breath of cold air. This couple was truly ruthless. So many Ice Soul mystic weapons were actually refined with 800,000 lives. He couldn't help but bitterly smile. "You two are really willing to spend time. You must have spent a lot of time capturing these 800,000 meditation cultivators." The Snow Emperor glanced at him disapprovingly and said, "You're thinking the wrong way. It won't take too much of our time. Apart from the thousands of Ice Soul profound soldiers who caught them at the beginning, the rest will be caught by these thousands of Ice Soul profound soldiers. When there are enough people, we just need to find some time to refine them. You should know that these Icy Soul profound soldiers can't be killed unless they encounter an absolute nemesis like you. So, they will only snowball in number. My wife and I only need to refine them every once in a while, and we don't need to worry about anything at all. Of course, if we meet an expert that they can't deal with, we will personally take action." Yu Qianqiu immediately thought of the scene when Grey Cloud Xin and Ding Xiang fought against the Ice Soul profound soldiers. Indeed, no matter how high their cultivation was, they couldn't kill those Ice Soul profound soldiers. They were clearly dead, but they could inexplicably come back to life. It was really shocking. From this, he thought of the Snow Emperor and his wife refining the Ice Soul profound soldiers. It was really as easy as rolling a snowball. TSK, if this goes on, won't your great snow mountain become the #1 force in the netherworld sooner or later? No, become the #1 force in the 3 realms. Yu Qianqiu sighed. He could imagine the scene of the Ice Soul profound soldiers spreading quickly in the 3 realms like a deadly virus. He was excited that he had such a strong backer, but he was also secretly shocked by this terrifying scene. He was already thinking if he should find a chance to get rid of this family of scourges. Otherwise, they would threaten him sooner or later. However, the Snow Emperor's next words dispelled his worries. The Snow Emperor smiled lightly and said, "Brother, your thinking is a little too naive. Let's not talk about whether we have that kind of ambition or not. First of all, once the Ice Soul profound soldiers leave the snow region, their power will be greatly reduced. Without snow, they can't be resurrected into various kinds of snow monsters that can attack. Unless we follow the Ice Soul profound soldiers wherever they go and cast a spell to make the snow fall first. But this is no different from putting out a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. You have to know that there are many powerful forces in the netherworld. Once they unite, even by chi has to give way. How can a mere Ice Soul profound soldier stop them? Moreover, now that the Great Snow Mountain is famous, ordinary people don't dare to trespass. So the number of Ice Soul profound soldiers has almost not increased. Also, you have to know that our cultivation is not the top in the netherworld. There are many experts who can kill us. Once we go too far, naturally, someone will come out to deal with us. As long as we are killed, do you think those Ice Soul profound soldiers that are driven by our spiritual sense imprints will still be useful? Therefore, the rules that should be obeyed must be obeyed. Since the ancient times, no one has ever been able to unify the entire underworld. Even the powerful emperor of the underworld, by chi, could only go with the flow. Unifying the underworld is just a pipe dream. Hee, I'm just saying it casually. Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly. He was relieved, but also a little regretful. Originally, He wanted to find the Snow Emperor, and the Snow Emperor to borrow 100 or 200,000 Ice Soul profound soldiers to kill everyone. Now it seemed that there was no hope. These Ice Soul profound soldiers could only do whatever they wanted in the snow region. Just as he was sighing, the Snow Emperor suddenly turned his head to his ear with a strange expression. His voice became magnetic and said, "Brother, do you want to practice the Xianming Soul Refining Technique?" Xianming Soul Refining Technique? Yu Qianqiu was startled. Then he remembered that he had heard of it before. It was the technique to refine Ice Soul profound soldiers. He said in astonishment, "I haven't swallowed and merged with the Ice Spirit. Why would I practice it?" "Brother, you're wrong." The Snow Emperor smiled gently and said, "Brother is proficient in the art of controlling fire. As long as you find a fire spirit to swallow and merge with, you can still practice the Xianming Soul Refining Technique. If I can refine Ice Soul profound soldiers, you can refine Fire Soul profound soldiers." Yu Qianqiu's mouth opened silently. His eyes became brighter and brighter. Suddenly, he hugged the Snow Emperor's arm and said, "Brother Snow, you're really my good brother. No, you're my big brother. You're closer to me than my real big brother. I've finally thought it through under your guidance. It's not a burden to have more skills. Learning one more skill is one more skill. There will be a time when it's useful. Come on." He opened a palm and stretched it out towards the Snow Emperor. His 5 fingers moved nimbly. "Give me the technique of the Xianming Soul Refining Technique. I'll definitely study it diligently, and I'll bring it to greater heights. I won't let you down." Chapter 1030. The Snow Monarch's expression stiffened. She did not expect to see Yu Qianqiu with such a huge contrast. After that, a smile appeared on her face. She pushed Yu Qianqiu's hand away and said, "I can teach you the Xianming Soul Refining Technique, but not now." "Why?" Yu Qianqiu couldn't believe it. He suddenly felt like he was fooled. "Don't misunderstand," Snow Emperor said sincerely. "There's something I have to make clear to you. Before you find and merge the fire spirit, even if I teach you the Xianming Soul Refining Technique, you can't practice it successfully. Why don't we make a gentleman's agreement? As long as you come back after merging the fire spirit, I will teach you the cultivation method of the Xianming Soul Refining Technique without missing a word. How about it?" "Oh," Yu Qian replied with a worried "oh." His hand that was grabbing the man's arm and the hand that was reaching out slowly retracted. He realized that there was no such thing as a free lunch in this world. He immediately understood Snow Emperor's intention. It was very simple. She wanted him to come back in time to remove the Samadhi true fire from Shui Linglong's body after merging the fire spirit. Snow Emperor saw that Yu Qianqiu understood her intention and could only smile bitterly. Actually, she didn't suspect that Yu Qianqiu wouldn't come back to save Shui Linglong after devouring the fire spirit. The reason why she threw out such a big temptation was that she hoped Yu Qianqiu could put more effort into finding the fire spirit and strive to find it as soon as possible. As for whether Yu Qianqiu could merge the Samadhi true fire, she didn't count on it. She pinned all her hopes on him finding the fire spirit. She explained with some embarrassment, "I just hope that Linglong can suffer less. I don't mean anything else. I hope you can understand my painstaking efforts as a parent." Yu Qianqiu was actually quite disgusted with the Snow Emperor setting a trap for him to fall into. But since the other party had made their intentions clear, his anger was somewhat appeased. Then he thought about how he had no way to use the Xianming Soul Refining Technique before he swallowed and fused with the fire spirit. In addition, the other party had treated him with sincerity, so he couldn't feel any resentment. He furrowed his brows and suddenly raised his head. "Fine, that's settled then. After I get rid of the Samadhi true fire in Linglong's body, I'll ask you for the Xianming Soul Refining Technique's incantation. Let's clap hands and swear." A palm rose into the air, and the Snow Emperor's spirits rose. She clapped her palm together and said excitedly, "It's a deal." Yu Qianqiu's body swayed from the other party's overly excited slap. He couldn't help but grumble. Why are you using so much force? He retracted his hand with a face full of resentment. The Snow Emperor immediately stretched out his hand to grab his shoulder and shook it. He laughed heartily and said, "Brother, please bear with me." It was as if he had forgotten all enmity with a smile. "Your wife feels good. Go and hug your wife. Don't hug me. It's disgusting." Yu Qianzhou's shoulder shook, and he twisted his body to avoid the Snow Emperor. The Snow Emperor, who had always prided herself on being pure and elegant, raised one hand. Her expression was twitching. However, Yu Qianzhou acted as if nothing had happened. He pointed at the various ice souls in the pillar that supported the pavilion and asked, "It seems that the reason why the colors of these ice souls are different is related to their cultivation. How do you differentiate them?" The Snow Emperor lowered her hand and smiled bitterly. "The ice souls formed by cultivators who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Knight are orange-yellow. Those who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Sage are azure. Those who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Venerable are red. Those who have cultivated to the level of Netherworld Emperor are black. It's very easy to differentiate them." Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly. He stared at the various ice souls in the pillar and admired them for a while. Then he clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the snow mountain in the distance. He seemed to have something on his mind. A gust of cold wind blew over and fluttered the hem of his robe. He asked indifferently, "From the look of that woman, Li Li, she seems to be very determined. Do you think that the people of the Li Palace will be waiting for us in the Underworld River? Are you preparing to leave? Don't you want to stay in my ice palace for a few more days?" The Snow Emperor lightly moved a step and sat on an ice stool. She looked at his back in the neon light and asked, "No need. I have no way of dispelling the true Samadhi fire in Linglong's body. I can't stand your wife's crazy appearance from time to time." Yu Qianzhou didn't move. He narrowed his eyes and stared into the distance. He said, "Besides, I have my own matters to attend to. I can't stand to miss Lady Jin's wedding." "Then I won't keep you any longer." The Snow Emperor sat there with one hand on the table. She lightly patted it with her palm and said, "But I must advise you, in order to avoid conflict with the water race of the Underworld River, don't go by water. Go by land. I see that the information in your ice palace is somewhat blocked. This might have something to do with the fact that your subordinates are all Ice Soul profound soldiers and can't help you scout for information. You might not know, but Sanyan Xian has already mastered the Unrequited Love Palace's 3 swords in one sword-drawing style. With Sanyan Xian here, the people of the Li Palace can't do anything to me. Before the Dragon Transformation Gate, I already made them hesitate for fear of harming the innocent." Yu Qianzhou indifferently said. Sanyan Xian has mastered the 3 swords in one sword-drawing style. The Snow Emperor was slightly solemn. Back then, Wang Qing had used this move to kill the Fire Virtue Immortal Lord. He had seen it with his own eyes, so he naturally knew the power of this move. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, "This matter has nothing to do with how powerful Sanyan Xian is. Even if Sanyan Xian can kill everyone in the Li Palace, the more he kills, the more trouble he will have. You might not know, but the water race of the Underworld River and the cultivators of the land of the Underworld have always abided by an ancient agreement: mutual non-aggression. Even after Bai Qi took control of the Underworld, he also obediently abided by this ancient agreement. Do I have to fight and not fight back?" Yu Qianzhou suddenly turned his head and said. The Snow Emperor pondered for a moment and said, "No one saw you kill the Crown Prince Lijiang. If they find you, you can continue to deny it. That ancient agreement is not only effective against the cultivators of the land, it is also effective against the water race of the Underworld River. They don't have any evidence, so they won't dare to do anything to you." Yu Qianzhou was silent for a long time. After a long time, he slowly asked, "I see that you all seem to be very secretive about the water race of the Underworld River. I heard that the water race of the Underworld River has a terrifying existence that is even more powerful than the Emperor of the Underworld. Is this true? If it's convenient, why don't you tell me so I can broaden my horizons?" "There should be but it's a pity that I haven't seen it in so many years in the underworld. The Snow Emperor's palm that was lightly slapping the table suddenly stopped moving. With a solemn expression, he recalled, "Many years ago, I once heard someone say that there is a mysterious cave in the depths of the underworld river. It is a forbidden area for the water race of the underworld river, called the Netherworld Divine Palace. It is said that there is a demigod expert that is almost like a god inside, silently protecting the water race of the underworld river." As for the specifics, the person who told this story was also not clear. He also heard it from others. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was slightly shocked. This underworld was indeed an unfathomable place. There was actually an expert that was almost like a god hidden in it. For a moment, he had no choice but to suppress the rash, killing intent in his heart. Chapter 10:31. The pitch-black night sky began to sprinkle the fine, salt-like snow again. It was not as spectacular as the feather-like snowflakes from before, but the rustling sound on the ground seemed to be louder, as if there were countless ants crawling on the ground. Yu Qianqiu stretched out his hand and waved it outside the pavilion. He smiled and said, "I wanted to enjoy the scenery on both sides of the Styx River, but now it seems that in order to avoid conflict with them, I can only borrow the path from Big Brother's Great Snow Mountain." "That's right. You know that you can't do it, but you still do it. The one who suffers is still you." The Snow Emperor heaved a sigh of relief, stood up, and walked to his side. He smiled and said, "When are you leaving?" "I will personally send you out of the Great Snow Mountain." "Let's go now. There's no need to send me off. It's too ostentatious to let the Snow Emperor send me off. I want to keep a low profile. Maybe it'll be convenient for me to seek refuge here one day." As Yu Qianqiu spoke, he chuckled with some pride. He crossed his hands behind his back and was about to step out of the pavilion when he suddenly turned his head and said, "I want to ask Big Brother a question. If one day I get into a conflict with the Heartless Palace's Wang Qing, who will you help?" The Snow Emperor was speechless. After hesitating for a while, he said awkwardly, "I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. If there's any conflict between the two of you, I won't help you, but I won't help him either. I can only help neither side." Yu Qianqiu smiled and walked out of the pavilion. He stepped on the snow on the ice cliff and strode toward the ice palace. If the Snow Emperor said that he would help him, he would be on his guard. After all, Wang Qing saved the life of the family of 3 years ago. His kindness was more than what he was now. It was obvious that the Snow Emperor was trying to fool him. Now it seemed that the Snow Emperor's character was not too bad. He was naturally relieved. The Snow Emperor thought that Yu Qianqiu would be unhappy. Instead, he saw a knowing smile on his face. He didn't seem to be offended at all. He was startled at first, but then he understood the reason. He couldn't help but shake his head and smile bitterly. He thought that this kid was too cunning, but at the same time, it made him feel a little relieved. From this point, it could be seen that at least this kid would not be killed so easily, and the possibility of finding the fire spirit was greater. On the ice cliff, Yu Qianqiu, Cangyan Xian, Ding Xiang, and Xin Yu all came out. Ding Xiang took out a flying shuttle, and the four of them cupped their hands towards the Snow Emperor, saying, "Farewell." The Snow Emperor regained his expressionless face and nodded slightly with his hands clasped behind his back. The four of them quickly boarded the flying shuttle, and Ding Xiang quickly drove it into the sky. Ding ling ling ling, sounds came from below. The few of them looked back and faintly saw the mother and daughter standing beside the Snow Empress. In the blink of an eye, they were far away, and nothing could be seen clearly. In a certain room on the 22nd floor of the Immortal Realm's Heavenly Chamber of Commerce, there was a rare absence of the clattering sounds of mahjong. Several women sat around an empty mahjong table, discussing the matter of Yu Qianqiu's trip to the underworld to help the fourth prince of the Li Palace's water tribe leap through the Dragon Gate. Words of surprise, envy, and worry filled the entire room. In reality, this legendary story had already spread throughout the entire Immortal Realm, but the women who were passionate about playing mahjong did not know about it. It was Nongzhu who came to tell them the news. However, When Nongju discovered that the mahjong tiles on the table were actually carved from her beloved purple bamboo from the Southern Sea's purple bamboo forest, she let out a crazy roar. As a result, Wei Chunqiu came to reprimand her. Nongju lost her temper the moment she met him, and could only resentfully confiscate the mahjong tiles that the women were playing with. Coming. Zi hurriedly rushed into the room with a wooden box in her arms. She placed it on the table where the women were sitting and opened the lid. The wooden box was opened and a pile of small pieces of white jade fell out with a rustling sound. Putting away the empty wooden box, Zi excitedly patted her chest to show off. I used the jade to make a new set of mahjong tiles to make up for my master's impulsiveness. Everyone can continue. The women took the white jade mahjong tiles and examined them carefully. They discovered that the size and the carvings on them were exactly the same as the ones made by Yu Qianqiu. The cut surface was smooth, and the corners were polished smooth. It could be seen that Zi had really put in a lot of effort. An even clearer clattering sound rang out. It might have something to do with the material of the mahjong tiles. The four women continued to surround the mahjong tiles, but they did not seem to be as passionate as before. They all seemed to be absent-minded. Hibiscus took out a whiteboard and worriedly frowned. I heard that the underworld is very dangerous. I wonder if it's safe for him there. Bang! He took out 2 whiteboards and touched Hibiscus tiles. She angrily threw out a tile and said, "That big swindler trapped us here, but he went to such an exciting place like the underworld to play. He must be up to no good again." As she spoke, she pointed at the women and said, "That big swindler is too fickle. Maybe when he comes back, he will bring another sister who can make up a table for you. Do you believe me?" The 100-charm beauty, who was watching from outside the mahjong table, shook her head and said, "He was right not to bring us. With our cultivation, we won't be of much help to the underworld. Instead, we will be a burden to him." The women nodded in agreement. Only Zi said indignantly, "You guys only know how to protect him. Just you wait. It would be best if he can bring 3 of us back at once. We can make up 2 mahjong tables, and you guys will be happy." The women looked at each other. Yinyu, who was sitting on Zi's hand, threw out a tile and jokingly said, "Why don't we wait for him to come back? We will persuade him to take you into his room as well." Zi's hand, which was reaching out to grab the tile, froze. Her pretty face instantly turned red. She was no longer the naive Zi. She had mingled with these women for a long time. In addition, she had always been curious and didn't feel ashamed to ask questions. She understood the relationship between men and women very well. How could she not know what it meant to take someone into her room? She felt shy, but she still said with a strong voice, "Only you guys like that big swindler. You even want to be taken into his room. I don't care." She clearly had a good tile in her hand, but she casually threw it out. This caused the 100-charm beauty, who was watching from behind, to laugh so hard that she trembled. After being laughed by her, Zi, who was staring at the tile, immediately reacted. Her face turned as red as an apple. She sat there embarrassedly and didn't say anything. According to her personality, if it was any other time, she would definitely say that she had made a mistake and snatch the tile back. However, she was afraid of exposing her thoughts in front of everyone, so she could only pretend that nothing had happened. However, the 100-charm beauty was secretly playing tricks and told the other 3 women about it. Immediately, the table burst into laughter. The 100-charm beauty pressed her hands on Zi's shoulders and laughed secretly. "If he takes the initiative to take you into his room, will you agree?" "He dares." Zi suddenly stood up and glared at them. She was a little angry, but she couldn't say no. She could only fiercely say, "If he dares to take me in, I dare to agree. See how I deal with him in the future. I won't protect him like you guys, humph." Then, she pushed the tiles on the table and shouted, "I'm not playing anymore. I'm not playing anymore. My good mood has been ruined by you guys." She turned around and quickly ran out with a red face. Her previous enthusiasm for playing mahjong was completely gone. She could only hear a disgusting laughter coming from behind her. In the back garden of the External Affairs Grand Commander's residence of the Immortal Realm of Bliss. Although Mu Tianjiao was already married and no longer participated in the affairs of the immortal realm, she still kept an eye on all the news in the immortal realm. After marrying Wu Xiong, due to Wu Xiong's authority, she was able to obtain more information than before. She didn't become isolated from the outside world just because she stayed indoors. In the pavilion in the back garden, Wu Xiong's subordinate left after delivering a Jade archive. Mu Tianjiao carefully read through the information in the Jade archive, then put it away in her storage bracelet. Every day at this time, a Jade archive would be delivered punctually. As long as it wasn't something taboo, the daily news of the three realms would be detailed in the Jade archive. Naturally, there was no need to worry about the source of the news from the Immortal Palace. Mu Tianjiao would store the Jade archive after she finished reading it. It wasn't because she had any desire to win, but because she believed that since she was already married, she should try her best to maintain a common topic with her man and maintain their relationship. Therefore, it was necessary for her to pay attention to the happenings in the three realms every day. After reading the information in the Jade archive, Mu Tianjiao sat there in silence for a long time. Not long after, steady and familiar footsteps could be heard from outside the garden. She quickly stood up, walked out of the pavilion, and walked along the small path to welcome them. In reality, as long as Wu Xiong was still within the immortal realm of bliss, he would return to his residence around this time every day. As expected, Wu Xiong saw that familiar smile as soon as he stepped through the garden gates. The two of them exchanged greetings, then walked into the pavilion, hand in hand, and sat down. This had become a habit for the two of them. Every time this happened, they would sit down and chat for a while. Similarly, every time this happened, Mu Tianjiao would start the conversation with words that warmed Wu Xiong's heart. However, today, Mu Tianjiao seemed a little absent-minded. Wu Xiong's gaze flickered as he studied her face. He smiled faintly and asked, "Is there something on your mind, madam?" Mu Tianjiao raised her head and looked at him for a while. She bit her lip and said, "I heard that my father has gone to the underworld. I wonder if the great commander knows about this?" Wu Xiong wanted to deny it and say that he didn't know. However, after a pause, he smiled bitterly and said, "So that's what it is. Actually, my father-in-law has spoken to me about this before. I didn't approve of him going, but he insisted on going. Given his status and the fact that he's not an outsider, I couldn't stop him by force. Before he left, my father-in-law specifically told me not to tell you about this. I've been hesitating on whether or not I should tell you. Since you already know, it saves me a lot of trouble. I know my father's temperament better than anyone else. I can imagine that he's determined to go." Mu Tianjiao's face was full of worry as she said, "But I'm really worried about his safety." Wu Xiong laughed heartily and said, "My father-in-law only said that he wanted to go to the underworld to see if he could expand the Four Links Chamber of Commerce's business channels. I don't think there will be any danger. Besides, before he left, I told him that if he encountered any trouble, he could report my name to the army of the Dark Underworld. I have some connections with the higher-ups of the army of the Dark Underworld. It shouldn't be a problem for me to resolve some problems. So, you don't have to worry too much. There shouldn't be any danger." Chapter 1032. As for the fact that Mu Bing had gone to deal with Yu Qianqiu, he wouldn't tell Mu Tianjiao. Unexpectedly, Mu Tianjiao said worriedly, "I saw the news earlier that Yu Qianqiu happened to help the Styx River tribe transform into a dragon. I'm worried that father is targeting Yu Qianqiu. If that's the case, it'll be troublesome." Wu Xiong's eyebrows twitched unconsciously. He couldn't help but say something he didn't want to say. It seems that Madam is very concerned about that Yu Qianqiu. Mu Tianjiao was startled. She was a smart person and knew that some of her words had aroused Wu Xiong's disgust. This kind of disgust was a common problem for men, but it was fatal and very hurtful. She immediately shook her head and said, "It can't be said to be concerned. It's just that when the Four Links Chamber of Commerce was in danger, Yu Qianqiu once helped us. He can be considered as a former friend of mine. Father's actions on the day of the wedding have always made me feel very guilty." Although she was smart and wanted to draw a line between her and Yu Qianqiu that couldn't be crossed, she didn't know that in order to vent his anger, her father had once fabricated a story that didn't exist and sold her out. As a result, her words sounded exceptionally harsh to Wu Xiong's ears. He could hear that she was trying to cover something up. Any man would find it hard to accept that his own woman was thinking about another man behind his back. Wu Xiong's face darkened as he said, "But why did I hear that Yu Qianqiu once pursued you? Commander, where did this come from? Who's deliberately slandering me?" Mu Tianjiao asked in astonishment. An almost imperceptible trace of panic flashed across her face. It wasn't true that Yu Qianqiu had pursued her, but it was true that she had pursued Yu Qianqiu. As a wife, she was naturally afraid that such a thing would be known by her husband. However, thinking that only she and Yu Qianqiu knew about it, based on her understanding of Yu Qianqiu, he would not say such a thing. It would not be good for him, so she immediately calmed down. However, Wu Xiong was silently paying attention to the other party's reaction after hearing these words. When he saw that this woman, who had always been calm in the face of trouble, was actually a little flustered, his heart immediately turned cold. However, when he remembered that her body had never betrayed him, his face instantly changed into a smile. He got up and walked over to hold her hand. Suddenly, he hugged her by the waist and said with a smile, "How could your husband not know that someone is deliberately slandering and driving a wedge between us? I have already executed that scoundrel. Madam, you don't have to take it to heart." With that said, he carried her directly to the courtyard where the two of them lived. Mu Tianjiao's words were perfunctory, but she also saw a trace of haze flash in Wu Xiong's eyes, and her body couldn't help but stiffen. In the bedroom, it was common for a couple to make love, but Wu Xiong tore off her clothes very rudely. There was no foreplay at all. Mu Tianjiao gritted her teeth and endured it. After that, Wu Xiong suddenly remembered that he had something to deal with. So he said goodbye, put on his clothes, and left straight away. She didn't know whether it was true or not. Mu Tianjiao, who was naked and lying on the bed, bit her lips and said nothing. Her white body was red and swollen. She could feel that he was venting almost crazily, as if he did not treat her as a human at all. His usual gentle and passionate caresses turned into fierce and heavy pinching, and the swelling on her chest and some parts of her body did not disappear for a long time. Her powerless gaze suddenly fell on her dressing table opposite her. The forever and earth conjoined sculpture that Yu Qianqiu had given her previously was still there, and it had disappeared. Mu Tianjiao's eyes immediately flowed with tears, and she murmured, "In the end, you still took it seriously and cared about it. If you marry a chicken, follow the chicken, and if you marry a dog, follow the dog. Why don't you believe me? When Wu Xiong sent someone to propose marriage, she did not even think about it and wanted to reject it. This was because she had long understood that if she married a man of heavenly status, even if she, a woman on earth, could leap up a tree and become a golden phoenix, the difference in status would be like heaven and earth, and she would have to live cautiously in the future. Her self-esteem could not stand that. However, for the sake of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, she still agreed. She believed that with her wisdom, she would be able to maintain a good relationship between them. However, the thing she worried about the most had still happened. Unfortunately, there was no medicine for regret in this world. She had originally married the other party because of his power, so naturally, she valued his power. For the sake of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce and her father, she could not resist at all. She did not even have the right to refute. Otherwise, the consequences would not be something she could bear. A flying shuttle rapidly traversed the dusky sky, and there were 7 or 8 people standing on it. This was not the first time Wu Bing had come to the underworld. He had come here to do business before, but it had always been on a small scale. He had never gone as deep as he did today. This was the first time he had heard of Twilight City. As for why he wanted to go to Twilight City, it was because the people around him had determined that Yu Qianqiu, who had broken into the underworld, should have gone to Twilight City. He originally came for Yu Qianqiu, so naturally, he also wanted to go to Twilight City. Moreover, after knowing that Twilight City was a place where some high-level sects in the immortal world did business in the underworld, He felt that with his current status, how could he not know about Twilight City? Of course, he had to go and take a look. Is there still no news from Twilight City? Mu Bing stood in the middle of the flying shuttle with his hands behind his back and asked the people standing in front of him with a lofty aura. In order to make things go smoothly for him in the underworld, Wu Xiong had secretly greeted some people in the underworld. When Mu Bing entered the underworld with the two early great immortal experts recruited by the Four Links Chamber of Commerce, there were already 5 underworld experts waiting for him. The 5 people were from 2 gangs, dressed in what seemed to be some of the underworld's rogue cultivators. Among them, there were 2 people who were serious in speech and manner, with a military momentum, and all of them were early underworld venerable. Among the other 3, 2 of them were late underworld venerable, and one of them had reached early underworld emperor. Although this lineup was not very strong in the underworld, it was still strong. However, when the 5 people saw Mu Bing, they all expressed their attitude and said that they would listen to his orders. Mu Bing was not a fool. Naturally, he understood that these people were secretly sent by Wu Xiong to help him. Although he did not point it out, he still accepted it as a matter of course. According to the calculation of the distance, they should have already arrived at Twilight City, but Twilight City said that they have not seen them yet. I guess they might have been delayed by something on the way. One of the 2 people replied, while the other person was driving the flying shuttle. Mu Bing frowned and thought for a moment, then changed into a kind attitude and asked a skinny old man with a goatee next to him, "Mr. Dong, do you think it is possible that they did not go to Twilight City at all, but went to other places?" The reason why he was so polite to the old man with a goatee was because this person had the highest cultivation in the group, early underworld emperor. Although he may not have the power of his son-in-law, but his cultivation was similar to his son-in-law's early immortal emperor, so naturally he was more respectful. The skinny old man stroked his beard and laughed. That is not necessarily true. Since they're going upstream along the Styx River, they must pass through the Great Snow Mountain. Then he waved his hand and pointed to the side. Before Mr. Mu came, we have already sent people to set up surveillance on the land route. As long as they leave the Styx River, they will enter our sight. According to the current situation, they may have broken into the Great Snow Mountain and angered the Snow Emperor and Snow Empress. They're already dead. Mu Bing looked in the direction of the old man's finger and found that they were flying over a vast white mountain range. Then he realized that it should be the Great Snow Mountain that the old man was talking about. He couldn't help but murmur to himself, if this is the case, then it is really convenient for him. The skinny old man's eyes flickered slightly. Then he smiled and said, "Although we are ordered to follow Mr. Mu's command this time, we don't know what the matter is. We don't know why the higher-ups ordered us to keep an eye on Yu Qianqiu. Can Mr. Mu tell us?" Mu Bing's face changed slightly. Then he said, "Mr. Dong is too impatient. I will let you know when the time comes." He also knew that Yu Qianqiu was now involved with the Immortal Emperor. If the details were leaked before the matter was completed, he was afraid that it would cause big trouble if the matter was exposed. "I'm only following orders. I don't want to ask about anything. I just feel that it is a little strange." The skinny Mr. Dong stared at Mu Bing and smiled. Although this Yu Qianqiu's cultivation is not that great, his reputation is not small. Especially since he carried the decree of the Golden Emperor when he traveled, it is already known to everyone. I can't think of anyone in the immortal world who would dare to have any ideas about him. However, I heard that during Mr. Mu's daughter's wedding, Mr. Mu and this Yu Qianqiu did not seem to be on good terms. I wonder if this matter has anything to do with it? Mu Bing was slightly angry, but he didn't dare to say anything. He only smiled non-committally. The skinny old man saw that Mu Bing didn't want to say anything, so he didn't mind. He waved his hand and smiled. "Mr. Mu doesn't need to take it seriously. I was just making a wild guess." Then he looked to the side with a smile, and after a while, he suddenly made a sound of surprise. He waved his hand in the direction of the Great Snow Mountain and said, "Slow down and fly. Wait and see who it is." The few people followed his gaze and saw a faint stream of light flying over from the depths of the Great Snow Mountain. The flying shuttle they were on immediately slowed down. Not long after, Mr. Dong, who had the highest cultivation, was the first to determine what it was. He frowned and said, "It's actually another flying shuttle. Normal people don't dare to enter the Great Snow Mountain, and those who can travel with the Snow Empress have high cultivation. They also don't need a flying shuttle. So who could it be?" Under their intentional slowing down, the two flying shuttles quickly approached. In fact, the people who passed through the Great Snow Mountain were none other than Yu Qianqiu and his group. They also wanted to see who was on the flying shuttle that was flying slowly in front of them. Song Yun Exen, who had the highest cultivation, swept a glance at the few people on the flying shuttle and immediately found a familiar person. He was stunned and said, "Mu Bing. Why is he here?" Mu Bing? Yu Qianqiu, who was watching with narrowed eyes, was also stunned. With his cultivation, he couldn't clearly see who was standing on the flying shuttle. He couldn't help but turn his head and ask, "You mean Wu Xiong's father-in-law, Mu Bing?" Chapter 1033. There was no need for Tsangyun Xin to answer. The distance between the two flying shuttles had rapidly shortened. He saw Mu Bing in the middle of the group at a glance, and the other party naturally saw him as well. Mu Bing was stunned at first. Obviously, he did not expect to meet Yu Qianqiu under such circumstances. After he reacted, he sneered again and again. It was as if he had worn out iron shoes in fruitless search, only to find what he had found without even looking for it. Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He looked at Tsangyun Xin beside him, and then at Mu Bing, who had a sneer on his face. The scene of him being humiliated in Wu Xiong's mansion in Paradise Wonderland replayed in his mind. He really did not expect that the two protagonists would actually be in the Netherworld. His slightly cold gaze finally locked on a Mu Bing. Back then, it was reasonable for Tsangyun Xin to humiliate him. After all, the two were enemies. It would be strange if there was no conflict. However, he never expected that Mu Bing would jump out as an ungrateful character and ruthlessly trample on his face in front of everyone. He was a loss for what to do and became the laughingstock of the immortal world for a while. From then on, Yu Qianqiu regarded Mu Bing as a dead man, with no room for redemption. "I didn't expect to meet Sect leader Mu here." Tsangyun Xin cupped his hands at the other party and glanced at the others. His words and actions had already elevated a small chamber of commerce president to a Sect leader. Mu Bing now indeed had this qualification. He had thousands of subordinates, and was no longer the small chamber of commerce that only had a few people and could go bankrupt at any time. "Greetings, Master Tsangyun." Mu Bing's eyes moved away from Yu Qianqiu and smiled at Tsangyun Xin in return. "So you're a Sect leader Mu of the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. Nice to meet you." Ding Xiang smiled and took the initiative to cup his hands. "I am Hidden Dragon Villa's elder Ding Xiang." He had naturally heard of the conflict between Mu Bing and Yu Qianqiu. Although Yu Qianqiu had saved his life before, for him, it was not worth offending Mu Bing, the Immortal Palace External Affairs Commander behind Mu Bing, for Yu Qianqiu. "Greetings, Elder Ding." Mu Bing hurriedly returned the greeting. To him, the Hidden Dragon Manor was one of the top sects in the immortal world. Although he had never come into contact with them, it was inevitable that he would have to rely on them in the future to develop his own forces. The skinny old man beside him cupped his fists and said with a smile, "I've long heard of the great name of Heartless Palace's chief priest, Priest Song Yun Xin. A few days ago, I even heard that Priest Song Yun Xin had single-handedly deterred the water race of the Netherworld River from making any reckless moves. He had long wanted to see his true appearance, but he didn't expect that he would be lucky enough to see him today. Nice to meet you. This old man is Dong Shunlai. Mr. Dong, you flatter me." Song Yun Xin clenched his fists slightly. He could tell that the other party was an expert from the Netherworld. He didn't dare to be too careless. After all, this was the Netherworld, not the immortal world. Dong Shunlai had already observed the people on the flying shuttle. One was Firmament Cloud Xin, one was Ding Xiang, and one was from the Styx River's water tribe. Since Firmament Cloud Xin was present, then the identity of the other person was self-evident. However, he still smiled and cupped his fist politely. May I know your name, friend? Well said. Yu Qianqiu returned the greeting. This one is Yu Qianqiu. Oh. Dong Shunlai dragged out the last syllable with a deep meaning. He looked at Mu Bing with a smile, as if asking, now that we've found the person, what should we do? The people on the flying shuttle all stared at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu couldn't see through the other party's strength. After replying, he stood there expressionlessly. Just as he was about to secretly ask Firmament Cloud Xin about it, Mu Bing couldn't stand the sight of a little tramp like him mingling with experts. He immediately sneered. Some people don't know how to weigh themselves. They're clearly a scoundrel who's not worth a fart. Instead of hiding in their nest and struggling at death's door, they came out to court death. They really can't be any more despicable. The atmosphere at the scene froze. Everyone could tell that he was talking about Yu Qianqiu. Firmament Cloud Xin frowned slightly. He had been with Yu Qianqiu for a while and knew that this guy had a crazy ruthlessness in his bones. If he was forced into a corner, he would do anything. He was worried that Yu Qianqiu would start a fight in a fit of anger. At that time, he would be in the most difficult position. He couldn't not protect Yu Qianqiu, and if he protected Yu Qianqiu, he was afraid that he would offend Wu Xiong, who was behind Mu Bing. He couldn't help but feel a little sullen. He felt that Mu Bing was too arrogant and didn't care about his face at all. Dong Shunlai glanced at Firmament Cloud Xin and chuckled twice with a fake smile. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a mocking expression. He wanted to see how this guy, who had caused so much commotion, would deal with it. Elder Ding, Yu Qianqiu said indifferently, someone is mocking you. Don't you want to beat him up? Son of a bitch. Ding Xiang was stunned. He didn't think that he would get hit while lying down. What did this have to do with him? How could he implicate others like this? He naturally knew that Mu Bing was talking about Yu Qianqiu and not him. His expression immediately twitched, and he smiled bitterly. That can't be. Unexpectedly, the one who was being scolded didn't react, but the one who was scolding him flew into a rage. How dare you? Mu Bing pointed at him and shouted. Yu Qianqiu, you cowardly bandit, how dare you frame me? You're indeed a famous, shameless scoundrel in the immortal world. If you have the ability, don't hide and rely on others to protect you. So what if I'm a scoundrel? You think you're worthy of criticizing me? Why don't you think about what you relied on to be able to have such an ostentatious appearance today? Yu Qianqiu swallowed the vicious words that were on the tip of his tongue. He originally wanted to say that Ding Xiang only relied on his daughter to sleep with someone else in exchange for glory and splendor. However, he still admired Mu Tianjiao's character and couldn't bear to tarnish such a woman. Secondly, with his current strength, it was really unwise to involve Wu Xiong in scolding him. Blatantly slapping Wu Xiong's face was no different from slapping the Immortal Palace's face. After all, Wu Xiong was the external affairs commander of the Immortal Palace. He stared at him with disdain and sneered. I don't know who is the one who begged a scoundrel like me for help. If it wasn't for this scoundrel, your 4 Links Chamber of Commerce would have long been razed to the ground by the 8 Pagoda Chamber of Commerce. If it wasn't for this scoundrel who risked his life to help you in the ruins of God, your 4 Links Chamber of Commerce would have long collapsed. Would you still be able to strut around like you do today? You ungrateful ingrate. I don't even want to scold you, yet you still shamelessly run out to be scolded. What the hell do you think you are? Who do you think you are? You. Mu Bing pointed at Yu Qianqiu with a flushed face. He was so angry that he was trembling. After holding it in for a long time, he could only say, You're courting death. With just you? Did you eat shit or did your head grow on your butt? What kind of bullshit is this? Yu Qianqiu sneered and pointed at him with disdain. Didn't you scold me for being a cowardly bandit? Fine, then I'll play with you. I don't need anyone's protection, and you don't need anyone's protection either. If you have the guts, then come out and fight me one-on-one. Let's see who's courting death. Do you dare? Do you have the guts? As soon as these words came out, everyone looked at each other with the people around them. Although Mu Bing had the cultivation of a late-stage, exalted immortal, no one dared to guarantee that he was a match for Yu Qianqiu. After all, the Sect leader of the 4 Islands of Lake Light was also a late-stage, exalted immortal, but 2 of them were still killed by Yu Qianqiu. However, These words were too vicious. Mu Bing was almost provoked to jump out by Yu Qianqiu. However, if he really had to face life and death, he didn't have the guts. With a good son-in-law as a backer, there were still good days ahead of him. How could he take this risk? After trembling with anger, he finally endured it and said stubbornly, "For the sake of the immortal emperor's decree, I'll let you go for now." Bullshit. You're just a chicken and a dog in my eyes. Killing you doesn't even need to expend any effort. Do I need you to let me go? I've seen shameless people before, but I've never seen someone as shameless as you. Yu Qianqiu rolled up his sleeves and waved his hand, saying, "If you have the guts, let's sign a life and death contract. No matter who dies, they asked for it. After that, no one will be willing to blame the other. Mu Bing, if you don't dare to accept the challenge today and scold me, I'll return all of it. I'll let everyone see who's the one hiding and relying on others to protect him." These words immediately put Mu Bing in a difficult position. He gritted his teeth, waiting for the people around him to give him a way out of this embarrassing situation. At this moment, everyone could see that Yu Qianqiu was deliberately provoking him. His purpose couldn't be more obvious. Obviously, he was very confident that he could take this opportunity to kill Mu Bing. Song Yin was someone who had seen Yu Qianqiu in action, so he knew that Mu Bing was no match for Yu Qianqiu. In fact, the unluckiest person here was him. Regardless of whether Yu Qianqiu or Mu Bing died, it wouldn't benefit him. Needless to say, Yu Qianqiu's life was temporarily linked to his. As for Mu Bing, if he didn't stop him and he was killed by Yu Qianqiu, who knew if Wu Xiong would blame it on him? Sect Master Mu, I don't care if you want to settle your grudge with Yu Qianqiu, but I hope that you can give this old man face and push this matter to after the immortal emperor's wedding. After all, this old man is carrying a heavy responsibility, and I can't just sit by and watch. You know this. Song Yin had to give Mu Bing a way out of this embarrassing situation. Although Dong Laishan, who had been watching from the sidelines for a long time, came here on orders, the reason why he didn't speak was because he didn't want to be foolishly betrayed. At this point, he already knew why Mu Bing came to the Netherworld. He immediately followed Song Yin words and chuckled. Sect Master Mu, since Exalted Song has spoken to this point, it won't be right if you don't give him face. You have a sharp tongue. You'll be crying later. Mu Bing threw out a ruthless remark, then turned around and shouted, "Let's go." Although he left the stage, his face was still livid. He had lost a lot of face today. Dong Laishun smiled and cupped his hands at Song Yin and the others, then quickly left in the blink of an eye. Yu Qianqiu stared at the flying shuttle in front of him and sneered, "Elder Ding, follow them." Chapter 1034. This. Ding Xiang immediately felt a toothache. This guy still didn't give up. He couldn't help but look at Song Yin for help. To be able to cultivate to this level, he didn't want to get involved in the grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Mu Bing. Although Yu Qianqiu saved his life, there were many ways to repay the favor. There was no need to throw his life away again. If he angered Wu Xiong, there was no guarantee that the hidden dragon manor wouldn't abandon him at a critical moment. Yu Qianqiu, if it was any other time, I would be more than happy to see you and Mu Bing fight to the death. Grey Cloud Xan frowned and said in a low voice, "But now, everyone is well aware of it, so there's no need for me to say anything more. Don't say that I didn't warn you. Even if you kill Mu Bing, Wu Xiong won't find trouble with you for the time, being out of respect for the immortal emperor. However, after the immortal emperor's wedding, Wu Xiong will have 10,000 ways to make you wish you were dead." Damn, isn't this bullshit? Wu Xiong still has a chance after this. I'm afraid your Song Yin will be the first to come after me. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot. In reality, he also knew that he couldn't kill Mu Bing in front of everyone. Not to mention that there were a lot of people stopping him. Even if he wanted to kill him, he couldn't do it in front of everyone. If the news was leaked, even if Wu Xiong wanted to save his face, the world commerce would be the first to suffer. After all, the immortal emperor's decree was given to him. It could only protect him temporarily and not the people of the world commerce. unless he could kill everyone present to silence them. It was a bit unrealistic. In short, if he wanted to kill Mu Bing now, he couldn't leave any evidence. As long as Wu Xiong didn't have any evidence, he would be wary of the immortal emperor and wouldn't dare to casually touch the world commerce. Otherwise, with the immortal emperor's power and tactics, he would probably turn a blind eye to it. There's no hurry to kill him now. Yu Qianqiu stared at the disappearing flowing light and narrowed his eyes. I just feel that it's a bit strange. This guy has Wu Xiong's support in the immortal world and has plenty of opportunities to earn money. Why would he suddenly come to the underworld? There's no need to go through so much trouble just to deal with me. Furthermore, he had mingled with the people from the netherworld. Presumably, the cultivation of the people around him was not low. This matter must have something to do with Wu Xiong. Otherwise, Mu Bing wouldn't be able to command the people of the underworld. Maybe there was some secret behind this matter. What if Wu Xiong did something shameful behind the immortal emperor's back? My premonitions have always been accurate. Aren't you interested in knowing? Elder Ding, follow me. I promise I won't do anything. He was speaking from the bottom of his heart. He did suspect that Mu Bing was up to something. However, Yu Qianqiu had wronged Mu Bing. Even in his wildest dreams, Yu Qianqiu would never have imagined that Mu Bing had spent so much effort to come after him. What would Yu Qianqiu think if he knew? What if Wu Xiong did something shameful behind the immortal emperor's back? Although the reason was a bit far-fetched, Grey Cloud Xin and Ding Xiang couldn't help but feel their hearts palpitate. If they really happened to have something on Wu Xiong, then it would be very useful at a critical moment. When Ding Xiang saw Grey Cloud Xin nod slightly in a non-committal manner, he immediately drove the flying shuttle and chased after him. Sect Master. Before the subordinate could finish speaking, Mu Bing immediately shouted, "Shut up!" His heart was filled with hatred. Joining the Four Links Chamber of Commerce halfway was just joining halfway. If his disciple, Nan Tianlong, was present just now, he would definitely protect him and not embarrass him like this. That disciple's expression stiffened, but he still braced himself and said, "It seems like they're catching up again." Although his cultivation was a level higher than Mu Bing's, Mu Bing had a good daughter and found a powerful man, so he could only compromise. Oh, Mu Bing suddenly turned around. Judging from the vague outline of the people, they were indeed catching up again. Deng Shan's expression slightly changed. He was actually quite afraid of death. If he had a bit of courage, he wouldn't have made a fuss and had to have his daughter come out to support him. Although he could use his connections to intimidate others, if someone really wanted to use force against him, he would immediately be afraid. The others also turned around to look. Dong Lai Shun slightly narrowed his eyes and said, "Sect Master Mu, if I'm not wrong, the purpose of your visit this time is to take the life of that Yu Qianqiu." Mu Bing swallowed his saliva. Now, he was a little regretful that he came to the netherworld to find Yu Qianqiu. At worst, he could just wait until the immortal emperor's wedding. At that time, there would be many ways to deal with him. He tilted his head and smiled awkwardly. Since Mr. Dong has already guessed it, I won't hide it anymore. That's right. They have already caught up. I wonder if Mr. Dong has any way to solve the current crisis? Crisis? Dong Lai Shun glanced at him with a slightly disdainful expression. He turned back to look at the two meditation cultivators with military aura and laughed. Presumably, with Sect Master Mu's ability, you still can't mobilize the people of the Dark Army to help. It seems like it's for the sake of your son-in-law, Wu Xiong. As expected of the External Affairs Commander of the Immortal Palace. I've never heard of him having dealings with our great king. I didn't think that they would be secretly communicating. He then looked at Mu Bing and said, "So it seems that Commander Wu is secretly supporting you in taking action against Yu Qianqiu. However, I'm a little curious. Is Commander Wu not afraid of the Immortal Emperor's thunderous rage if the news is leaked? You should know that Yu Qianqiu carries the Immortal Emperor's decree with him." Mu Bing's expression immediately became ugly. He didn't know where this Dong Lai Shun came from, but he knew that the two meditation cultivators with the pseudonyms of Black Big and Black Two were indeed people of the Dark Army. Before coming here, Wu Xiong had told him that the Dark Army would send these two people to be his contacts. If he really encountered any trouble that he couldn't solve, he could ask these two people to contact the people of the Dark Army for help. Mu Bing's expression was ugly. I don't think Mr. Dong will leak this matter. Of course not. I came here on the Great King's orders. If I messed up, how would I report back? Dong Lai Shun smiled and shook his head. Sect Master Mu's two subordinates have a higher cultivation than Sect Master Mu. As the Sect Master, do you think you can order them around? Although the two people that Mu Bing brought with him didn't like hearing this, they still had to endure it. Not to mention that the person who said this was an early-stage Netherworld Emperor. He wasn't someone they could afford to offend. Seeing that Dong Lai Shun was getting further and further away, Mu Bing looked at the flying shuttle that was getting closer and closer and said with some anxiety, "When I was recruiting talents, I recruited them. It's not strange that their cultivation is higher than mine. Mr. Dong, the most important thing right now is how to get rid of those people behind us. This Yu Qianshou is famous for being a madman and is capable of doing anything." No. Sect Master Mu is mistaken. The most important thing right now is to not let others know that you are targeting Yu Qianshou and that Great Commander Wu Xiong is involved. This is something you're doing behind Great Commander Wu Xiong's back. Dong Lai Shun smiled and waved his hand. Suddenly, his hands grew longer. His palms shot out like ghostly claws and instantly grabbed the heads of the two subordinates that Mu Bing brought with him. Puff! Their brains splattered on the spot. The two didn't even have time to scream before they lost their lives. Their corpses were thrown out of the flying shuttle by the two withered arms. As a result, Mu Bing was so scared that his face turned pale. He retreated and said in a panic, What do you want to do?" Dong Lai Shun retracted his arms, and his terrifying and sinister arms instantly returned to normal. He looked at Mu Bing and shook his head slightly. He finally understood why the king had sent him to do such a thing. This guy actually brought two people that he couldn't completely control. Sooner or later, Wu Xiong will be killed. At the same time, he also faintly guessed that the king and Wu Xiong might have some secret that couldn't be exposed. Previously, when he guessed Mu Bing's intentions, he thought that the king had sent him to distract Ashy Cloud Messenger so that Mu Bing could find an opportunity to kill Yu Qianshou. This made him rather unhappy because he didn't have the slightest confidence in dealing with the Heartless Palace's 3 swords in 1 sword drawing style. Now, it seemed that this wasn't the case at all. The main purpose was to prevent the situation from getting out of control. As for the secret between the king and Wu Xiong, that wasn't something that he should worry about. The king clearly trusted him by sending him to do this. If he went overboard and inquired about the secret that he shouldn't know, he would be courting death. But what made Dong Lai Shun feel strange was that if there really was a secret, why would Wu Xiong do such a stupid thing? Because the risk of exposing the relationship between the two sides was too great. If it was just to get rid of Yu Qianshou, the king could have sent an expert to do it alone. There was no need to put Mu Bing in the middle, because even if Jin Tai was unhappy, he wouldn't have the ability to intervene in the underworld. Protect me. Mu Bing hid behind Black 2, who was sent by the army of Onyx. Black 2 said expressionlessly, "Mr. Mu, don't panic. Mr. Dong has already discussed it with us before we made our move. He did the right thing. Those 2 people must be eliminated." Mu Bing looked at these people in horror. He suddenly felt like he had fallen into a wolf's den. Dong Lai Shun acted as if nothing had happened. Looking at the flying shuttle that was gradually catching up, he smiled and said, "Sect Leader Mu is actually worrying too much. The Heartless Palace is under the control of others. Ashy Cloud Messenger doesn't have the guts to go against Great Commander Wu Xiong. According to our previous judgment, they were originally going to Twilight City. They were just continuing on their way. They shouldn't be chasing after us. But that Yu Qianshou is protected by Ashy Cloud Messenger. It is indeed a troublesome matter. If we don't lure Ashy Cloud Messenger away, I'm afraid that we can't kill Yu Qianshou. That 3-in-1 sword drawing style is really not something that anyone can block." Hearing this, Mu Bing gradually recovered from his fright. Thinking about how Wu Xiong had no reason to harm him, his courage immediately grew and he slowly asked, If that's the case, does Mr. Dong have any way to resolve this? If he didn't have scruples about Ashy Cloud Messenger, he would have already asked everyone to kill Yu Qianqiu. How could he have humiliated himself? Chapter 1035. Dong Laishun looked at the flying shuttle and smiled. With the protection of the ash-gray cloud letter, there's no good way. But we're not far from Twilight City. We'll see when we get there. There's always a way to get him away from Yu Qianqiu. Good. Then let him live for a few more days. Mu Bing gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. His resentment was not gone for a long time. Ding Xiang drove the flying shuttle and followed at a distance of nearly a kilometer. He did not widen the distance, but did not get too close either. The two sides moved forward quickly, one in front and one behind. There was no surprise or danger along the way. After a full 5 days, as the flying shuttle in front slowly slowed down, Ding Xiang also slowed down. He looked back and said to them, "We have arrived at Twilight City." Needless to say, they had already seen the distant plains dotted with lights like the stars in the night sky. The area was not small, but for the underworld that was immersed in the night, it seemed a bit different. Among them, except for Yu Qianqiu, everyone had been here before. So Yu Qianqiu looked around curiously. The flying shuttle carrying Mu Bing and the others had already dived into the waning light. The flying shuttle behind them was about to land when Yu Qianqiu shouted, "Wait!" Ding Xiang understood and stopped the flying shuttle in the air. Most people who came here for the first time would inevitably look at the environment of Twilight City curiously. Below was a huge city wall, crisscrossed rows of houses, and the lights shining through the windows were the little stars in the distance. There were few tall buildings in the city wall. Occasionally, a 3-story attic was already considered high. The seemingly disorderly but orderly streets were intertwined like a net. The strange thing was that most of the lights were lit in the rooms, and there were few illumination objects on the wide or narrow streets outside. In the center of the city, there was a square that wasn't small. In the middle of the square, there was a circular foundation that was 10 meters tall and nearly 100 meters tall. However, on the foundation, there was a huge snake statue that was also nearly 100 meters tall, towering into the night sky. Unfortunately, this snake-shaped sculpture was a broken stone sculpture. To be more precise, it was a statue with a snake's body and a human head. The lower half of the statue's body was supported by a snake's coiled tail. There was nothing above the shoulder. The reason why one could tell that the upper body was that of a woman was because there was a pair of large and plump breasts exposed to the air on the naked upper body. Further up, the shoulders and head were damaged for some unknown reason. The flying shuttle they were on was not far from the giant statue. It looked like a tiny dot in comparison. Yu Qianqiu stared at it for a long time and suddenly asked, "Shenyu, what does this statue mean?" San Yunxin and Ding Xiang also looked at Shenyu. They also did not know why this statue was standing there. Shenyu said respectfully, "I don't know what it means. It is said that when Twilight City was discovered, this broken statue was here, but no one knows why." "Then why is it called Twilight City?" Yu Qianqiu continued to ask. Shenyu replied with a bitter smile, "I don't know either. I don't know who first discovered this place. Anyway, the name Twilight City has been passed down for countless years, and no one can explain what it means. It's just a broken ruin. It doesn't matter what it's called. Why do you have to ask?" San Yunxin said impatiently. Yu Qianqiu nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to say that they should find a place to rest, he suddenly heard the sound of crashing waves in the distance. It was coming from the direction the statue was facing. Yu Qianqiu turned around and saw a strong wind blowing from afar. His clothes fluttered in the wind. He was sensitive to the humidity in the air and asked, "Is there a lake in front?" Ding Xiang laughed and said, "It's not a lake. Not far from here is the Styx River. Twilight City is built on the bank of the Styx River." Jiyu added, "The place directly opposite Twilight City is the widest basin of the Styx River. So that's how it is." Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and glanced at Twilight City. From time to time, he could see people flying in from all directions, and he could also see people flying in all directions. His eyes finally fell on the exquisite giant statue. Although it was broken and had experienced countless years, it was still difficult to hide its vividness. The broken statue seemed to be using the whistling wind to tell something. Glory? Sadness? Or something else? Yu Qianqiu had this feeling. He listened attentively, but he could not understand the language of the wind. It could only be understood, but not expressed. However, he did not have such a high level of understanding, so he still got nothing. After a while, Yu Qianqiu turned to look at Sun Exine and Ding Xiang. He smiled and said, "I think both of you have a place to stay here. Where do you think you should stay?" Sang Exine was silent. Ding Xiang glanced at him. He could imagine how awkward it would be to protect his enemy in front of his fellow disciples. He chuckled and said, "If you don't mind, you can stay at my hidden dragon villa for the time being." After that, he drove the flying shuttle around the giant sculpture and flew diagonally forward. The hidden dragon villa's foothold in Twilight City occupied a whole street. The street was not long. Perhaps it should be called an alley. Dozens of houses on both sides of the street were occupied by the people of the hidden dragon villa. It was unknown how many people lived there, but from the hundreds of people that Ding Xiang brought in front of the Dragon Transformation Gate, it could be seen that there were at least more than 100 people. Elder Ding Xiang was sent by the Hidden Dragon Mountain Villa to guard this place. After he arranged for them to stay in a small stone house, he acted as if he had nothing to do with them. After exchanging some pleasantries with them, he said he had something to do and left. Even when Yu Qianqiu asked him to send someone to check on the situation of Mu Bing and the others, he politely refused. In fact, he did not want to get involved with these people anymore. He did not get to eat meat and almost got himself into trouble. When they arrived at the destination, they naturally parted ways. Yu Qianqiu was concerned about the location where Mu Bing and the others were staying. He could not stay idle and wanted to take Jiuyu out for a walk. How could Sang Exine let him run around? It was known that this was a place where killing was not against the law. He had no choice but to follow. The three of them went out and shuttled through the maze-like streets. Yu Qianqiu looked around at the exotic stone buildings around him. In fact, the entire Twilight City was built with large and small stones. The shapes were similar. Although simple and elegant, it was a maze. The vicissitudes of life lingered on the streets. There were almost no pedestrians on the streets. Most of them were rising and falling in the air. After walking east and west for a few streets, even Sang Exine and Jiuyu lost their way. The three of them had to fly into the air to find the direction. Yu Qianqiu looked around and finally found the place where Mu Bing and the others landed. He took the lead and flew over. Sang Exine and Jiuyu looked at each other and immediately understood that he was still thinking about Mu Bing and the others. However, when they landed on the street, they found that it was a large main street. There were no less than 1,000 stone houses on both sides. There was no way to find where Mu Bing and the others lived. He couldn't possibly interrogate them one by one, right? It would be impolite to use their divine sense to investigate. This was the Netherworld. Who knew who lived in the houses on both sides? Yu Qianqiu thought about it and decided to ask Ding Xiang for help. He had already rejected Sang Exine's request to ask the people from the Heartless Palace for help. He said that he had no obligation to do so, and Yu Qianqiu could not force him. Therefore, the three of them directly returned to the place where they came from. They broke into a house on the side and asked a disciple of the Hidden Dragon Villa where Ding Xiang was. The disciple knew that they were guests brought by Elder Ding, so he led them to Ding Xiang's residence. However, before they entered the door, they saw a large group of people in the sky. They landed on the roofs on both sides of the street and surrounded the entire street. These people were all dressed in black armor and had swords on their waists. They stared at the people below. Yu Qianqiu had seen the same people at the exit of the Netherworld. The army of the dark underworld. A surprised voice was heard. The disciples of the Hidden Dragon Villa came out in shock. They looked at the people surrounding the entire street in shock. Ding Xiang naturally came out in shock too. He was not in the mood to care when he saw Yu Qianqiu and the others standing at the door. He walked to the street and looked around. Finally, he cupped his fist toward a person dressed like a general on the roof and said, "Oh, it's General Liu." He pointed to the people on the roofs and said, "The Hidden Dragon Villa has always strictly followed the rules of the Netherworld. What is the meaning of this? Elderding, something has happened around here recently. I was ordered to investigate all suspicious people. I heard that you brought back 3 strangers. Please hand them over so that I can bring them back for interrogation," General Liu said coldly. Yu Qianqiu and the others looked at each other. He must be referring to the 3 of them. This. Ding Xiang looked at Grey Cloud Xin and the others who happened to be standing beside him. He immediately pointed to the 3 people on the roof and smiled bitterly. "General Liu, you've misunderstood. They're not suspicious. One of them is Great Priest Grey Cloud Xin of Heartless Palace. The other is Sect Master Yu Qianqiu of World Commerce. And the last one is from the River Styx tribe." "How dare you?" General Liu shouted coldly. "Ding Xiang, since when is it your Hidden Dragon Villa's turn to interfere with the army of the Dark Underworld? It's not up to you to decide whether they are suspicious or not. I will investigate everything. Guards, take the 3 of them away." He pointed at Grey Cloud Xin and the others. Ding Xiang immediately smiled bitterly at the 3 of them and slowly retreated, indicating that there was nothing he could do. A dozen soldiers immediately dashed down from the roofs. They even took out shackles and handcuffs and pressed toward the 3 of them. Yu Qianqiu was speechless as he dug his ears. He wasn't afraid, but he couldn't understand how he could be so unlucky as to encounter a game of soldiers catching thieves the moment he arrived. He didn't know what was going on around him, but strangers were being taken back for interrogation. Chapter 1036. Old Song. What do we do? Yu Qianqiu bared his teeth as he looked at the approaching soldiers. He knew almost nothing about the Onyx Army, and he didn't know if this damn place would capture people at the drop of a hat. He could only ask for the Ash Cloud Letter's opinion first. It didn't matter if they were to arrest him for questioning. After all, an upright person was not afraid of a crooked shadow. However, if it was easy to be wrongly accused, then he would naturally resist. After all, the number of people who died unjustly was uncountable. It was meaningless for him to join the ranks of the dead. No one has ever used torture tools on Song Yunxin. Song Yunxin touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist with his right hand and stared coldly at the general standing on the roof. "If you want to bring us in for questioning, we are willing to cooperate. However, if you want to use torture tools on us before we understand the situation, I will not allow it." After all, he had been to the Netherworld and knew how powerful the shackles of the Onyx Army were. Once they were bound, it would be very difficult to break them. If the other party wanted to play tricks on him, it would be equivalent to losing 90% of his strength. It was no different from seeking death. How could he allow himself to be restrained before he understood the situation? Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu immediately nudged the panicking Shunyu with his elbow, signaling him to get ready. Shunyu was now deeply depressed. He regretted setting up the Mirage Mist formation. Now, trouble kept coming one after another. On the roof, General Liu said indifferently, "You want to resist? It's not really resistance. I made myself very clear. If it's just a question, we will cooperate." Song Yunxin narrowed his eyes and said, "But everything has to be reasonable. If you're being unreasonable, our Heartless Palace's sword-drawing technique is not to be trifled with." "You dare threaten the Onyx Army?" General Liu's eyes flickered. "Do you believe that I can kill every single person of your Heartless Palace in the Netherworld with a single command from me?" Song Yunxin nodded slowly. "I believe you have that ability. However, I see that you're only a beginner Underworld Emperor. Do you believe that once I draw my sword, you won't even have the chance to give the order?" These words were indeed spoken with the demeanor of an expert, causing Yu Qianqiu to have a whole new level of respect for him. He actually dared to say such words to the general of the army of the Dark Underworld, which deterred the Underworld. However, after looking at the sky, he immediately understood why the old man was so stubborn. It was because he was riding a tiger and couldn't back down. At this time, There was already a large group of people standing in the air to watch the show. They were all attracted by the commotion here. The people here were all strange, and their clothes were all strange. The people of the Heartless Palace were also among them. When an elder of the Heartless Palace who was in charge realized that the main character of the commotion was actually the chief elder of the sect, he was instantly shocked. He hurriedly dodged and bowed to Ching Yun Xin. "Greetings, great deacon." Then he turned to General Liu on the roof and cupped his fists. "General Liu, I think there must be some misunderstanding. He is our sect's high priest, Song Yun Xin." General Liu's gaze fell on Song Yun Xion's hand that was stroking the storage bracelet. He said lightly, "Since the Heartless Palace can testify for you, there is no need for torture tools. However, an interrogation is inevitable. If the matter has nothing to do with you, we will naturally let you go. If it is related to you, even the head of the Heartless Palace will not be able to save you. Take him away." Since the other party had made a concession, Song Yun Xin had no other choice. After all, he still had to consider the Heartless Palace. As for Yu Qianqiu, he fully believed that Song Yun Xin would not harm him for the time being, so he made do with it. As for Shun Yu, he naturally followed Yu Qianqiu's lead. In this way, under the watchful eyes of everyone, the three of them were surrounded by hundreds of soldiers of the army of the Dark Underworld and were taken away. Twilight City was the underground trading place of the immortal underworld and the underworld. Naturally, there was a need for people to maintain order. An army of the Dark Underworld was stationed here. It could be said that they had the final say in Twilight City. Naturally, the location where they were stationed was the best in the city. It was the largest stone building on the edge of the central square. The building was majestic, and the curved arch door was wide open. Song Yun Xin and the other two entered the city guard's mansion under the command of the soldier. Other people were isolated outside. The three of them were taken to the door of the prison behind the house and immediately stopped in surprise. Looking at the thick metal fence, it was obviously a prison cell for prisoners. Song Yun Xin said in a deep voice, "What is the meaning of this?" The soldier who led the way said with a blank expression, "Nothing. In order to prevent anyone from escaping, no matter who it is, they must be detained here before the interrogation." The black metal door opened. Song Yun Xin hesitated for a while, but he thought that as long as his hands and feet were not bound, the prison should not be able to stop his 3 swords and 1 sword drawing style in case of an accident. He immediately took the lead and walked in. Going down the steps of the prison door, they went deep into the large underground prison. Walking in the prison corridor illuminated by fluorescent stones, one side was a thick stone wall, and the other side was a single cell made of metal fences that were as thick as a child's arm. The gaps between the metal bars were relatively tight, and there were also horizontal bars. At most, only a fist could reach through the bars. The entire cage was a metal cage. It was likely that the metal bars were not ordinary items, otherwise they would not be able to imprison a cultivator. The more the three walked, the more suspicious they became. The prison was empty, and they did not see any other prisoners. After walking through a few more empty cells, Yu Qianqiu was about to ask, but the soldiers who were holding them down stopped first. One of them opened the prison door and shouted, "Go in." The three of them were stunned when they saw the people who were imprisoned in the next cell. It was none other than Mu Bing and the others. They saw Dong Lai Shun, who was sitting cross-legged, stood up, dragging the handcuffs and leg shackles. He smiled at them and said, "I thought we were the most unlucky ones. I didn't expect Song Yun Xin and you to be detained. Huh, we are really in the same boat. Hey, that's not right." Dong Lai Shun's gaze swept over the men's hands and feet, and he immediately roared at the soldiers outside. Why aren't they wearing torture tools? The others also abruptly stood up and angrily rebuked the injustice, and the prison immediately echoed with their voices. The soldiers were expressionless, and they could not be bothered to pay them any attention. Song Yun Xin snorted and did not say anything. Seeing that these people were also locked up, and their treatment was even worse, the three of them immediately dispelled their suspicions. Instead, they calmly walked into the cell. People were always like this. When they compared themselves, they would find their shortcomings, and when they compared themselves, they would find that they were quite good. Therefore, the most terrifying thing between people was to compare themselves with each other. Bang! After the soldier closed the door, he went to the next cell and opened it. He pointed at a person and said, "Go in order, one by one. You come out first." The person who was pointed at walked out with a face full of indignation, and as soon as the door was closed, the soldier escorted him away. As the door to the dungeon disappeared with a clang, two cells separated by iron bars could be seen. On one side, there were 3 people, and on the other side, there were 5 people staring at each other. The side with fewer people was free and idle, while the side with more people had torture tools on their bodies. It was a lot more miserable. Yu Qianqiu looked around and could not help but feel a little emotional. He did not know if it was fate with being in prison, but he could not remember how many times he had been in the palace in his previous life. Including this time in this life, it was already the 3rd time. The first time was in on Kwangsung's Spirit Stone Mine. The second time was in the prison of Lust City in the Eastern Holy Lands. The 3rd time, which was also this time, was even more exaggerated. He actually came to the netherworld to be imprisoned. It was really like seeing a ghost. Could it be that he was born to be imprisoned? **T. Yu Qianqiu could not help but blurt out. It attracted everyone's attention, but no one understood what he was saying. When he turned around and saw everyone staring at him in confusion, Yu Qianqiu smiled and walked to the cell next door with his hands behind his back. He stared at Mu Bing, who was handcuffed and shackled, and said with a chuckle, "I say, Mu Bing, instead of being Great Commander Wu's father-in-law in the immortal world, you came here to be imprisoned. You really have a lot of fun." "Oomph." Mu Bing snorted coldly. "Don't try to be sharp-tongued, or you'll be crying." Dong Lai Shun, who was at the side, immediately intervened between the two of them to be the peacemaker. He said, "Let's all talk less. Don't make a fuss at a time like this. If there's anything, let's talk when we get out." As he spoke, he tilted his head and secretly glared at Mu Bing. Mu Bing snorted coldly again and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes and did not speak, as if he did not care about what was happening outside. Yu Qian chuckled in a melancholy manner and wandered around the small space in a leisurely manner. After a while, another 2 soldiers came and opened the cell next door again. One of them pointed at Mu Bing, who was sitting cross-legged, and shouted, "You, come out." Mu Bing stood up expressionlessly and walked out of the cell door, following the 2 soldiers. Just like this, every once in a while, a prisoner would be taken out of the cell next door. It was only when Dong Lai Shun cupped his hands at a cellmate and was taken away that the cell next door was completely empty. The 3 of them looked at each other. Needless to say, if they guessed correctly, it should be their turn next. As expected, not long after, 2 soldiers came and opened the cell door. One of the soldiers pointed at Shunyu and said, "You come out." Shunyu was instantly a little frightened. Yu Qianqiu patted his shoulder and smiled. "Don't be nervous. I have experience in this. You will get used to it after a few times." It's okay. You are from the River Styx's water tribe. They won't dare to do anything to you." Shunyu thought about it and went out obediently. After leaving the dungeon, he was immediately escorted to the main hall in the front yard. The spacious hall was simple and solemn. There were 4 soldiers holding swords standing on both sides, and the general with the surname Liu was sitting behind a stone table at the front. Shunyu stood in the hall, trembling. As he was thinking about what the other party would ask and how he should answer, he saw General Liu looking at him coldly and saying, "You are from the River Styx's water tribe. This has nothing to do with you. You can leave now." Shunyu was stunned. He did not expect that General Liu would let him go without even asking him a question. Before he could regain his senses, a soldier in the hall shouted, "What are you waiting for? Hurry up and leave. Do you want to stay and be punished?" Shunyu did not dare to stay any longer. He immediately bowed and hurriedly walked out of the city guard's mansion. Chapter 10:37. Many people gathered outside the city guard's mansion to watch the show. No one knew why the Onyx army was going through so much trouble. When they saw that GU was the first to come out, they were surprised but felt that it was reasonable. After all, he was from the River Styx's water tribe. The Onyx army would not dare to touch him. Otherwise, they would be breaking the ancient rule. By then, even Madame Blackpool would not be able to protect them. The Heartless Palace elder in charge here was He Jinquan. When he saw GU come out, he immediately went over and cupped his hands at GU. I am He Jinquan, the Heartless Palace elder. Song Yun Xin, who went in with you, is the chief high priest of our sect. We are from the same sect. May I know your name? River Styx's water tribe. GU. GU replied politely. So it's Mr. G. He Jinquan cupped his hands and asked politely. You all went in together, but Mr. G was the first to come out. Can you tell me what happened inside? Is our high priest safe and sound? He's temporarily imprisoned inside. He's fine for now, GU suddenly exclaimed. He looked around and did not see Mu Bing and the others. He asked suspiciously, You said I'm the first to come out? That's right. Is there a problem? He Jinquan did not dare to be careless. If anything happened to Song Yun Xin here, he would not be able to escape responsibility. The dark and skinny GU frowned. Before I came out, there were already 6 people who came out to be interrogated. Did none of them come out? Why didn't I see them go back? Where did they go? He Jinquan smiled worriedly. The city guard's mansion is so big. They should be somewhere else for now. It's probably because you're from the River Styx's water tribe, so they don't dare to do anything to you. That's why they let you out first. GU's frown eased, and he nodded slightly. He felt that was the case. In the dungeon, 2 soldiers came again. They opened the cell door and pointed at Song Yun Xin. It's your turn. Come out. Just as Grey Cloud Xin walked to the door, he paused and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was alone in the cell. He frowned and said, Why do you have to go back and forth so troublesome? Just call him, and we'll go out together. What he was worried about now was what would happen if someone tried to kill Yu Qianqiu while he was away. It was not that he treasured Yu Qianqiu's life, but if Yu Qianqiu died, his own life would come to an end. The soldier immediately shouted, Of course, there are rules for interrogation. How can we give you a chance to collude on the spot? We have to interrogate you one by one. Don't dawdle, go quickly. Song Yunxin thought about it and agreed, but he was still worried about Yu Qianqiu's safety. Yu Qianqiu walked to the door with a smile and said, Old Song, you go first. I have some relationship with Lady Blackpool, so I don't think these little pawns would dare to do anything to me. As soon as he said that, the 2 soldiers looked at each other in surprise. Grey Cloud Xin was also slightly startled. He looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He didn't know when Yu Qianqiu had gotten involved with Madame Blackpool. Even so, he still released his divine sense to scan the entire dungeon. After confirming that there was no one else, he left with the 2 soldiers with a little relief. After leaving the dungeon, he was sent to the main hall in the front room, just like Xinyu. One of the soldiers who escorted him quickly walked to the side of the general who was sitting calmly in the hall. He lowered his head slightly, obviously transmitting his voice to the general. General Liu was taken aback for a moment. Then he sneered and said, What a joke. Madam is of high status and power. How could she have any relationship with him? Don't pay attention to his nonsense. The soldiers seemed to want to say something, but he eventually shut his mouth and retreated. Song Yunxin, who was standing in the hall, had already guessed that they were talking about Yu Qianqiu. In fact, he did not take Yu Qianqiu's words seriously. Just think about it. He had never seen Lady Blackpool or heard that she had been to the immortal realm before. On the other hand, it was clearly Yu Qianqiu's first time in the Netherworld realm. How could he have any relationship with Lady Blackpool? If he really had such a great reputation, he would not have ended up like this. Suddenly, Song Yunxin stared at the person sitting high in the hall and said in a deep voice, Ask anything. I will tell you everything I know. General Liu nodded slightly, then tilted his head and said, Call He Jinquan of Heartless Palace in. One of his subordinates immediately ran out. Song Yunxin looked at the hall in confusion. Not long after, He Jinquan followed his subordinate into the hall. He gave Song Yunxin a once-over and heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that he was unharmed. He cupped his fists and said, "Greetings, High Deacon." He then cupped his fists and said, "General Liu, may I know what you have summoned me for?" General Liu was still wearing his armor. He sat behind the stone table in a dignified manner. After staring at the two of them for a while, he casually picked up a Jade archive from the table and looked at it. After a long while, he put it down and looked at the people below. He asked, "He Zhenquang, are you certain that he is the chief high deacon of your heartless palace, Song Yunxin?" Song Yunxin's gaze turned cold. He thought that General Liu was up to something again. He Zhenquang quickly replied, "General Liu, what do you mean by that? If he isn't my sect's high deacon, I wouldn't have needed to step forward. That makes things easier. I'll take it that your heartless palace is vouching for him." General Liu placed his arms on the table and stared at the people below. He said indifferently, "Since you're the one who vouched for him, I won't ask any more questions. However, I'll be frank. If I find out that he has anything to do with the matter I'm investigating, don't blame me for being rude to your heartless palace." He Zhenquang stole a glance at Song Yunxin. He didn't know what was going on around him, nor did he know if it had anything to do with Song Yunxin. He couldn't make up his mind if he wanted to use the lives of everyone from Heartless Palace in the underworld as collateral. He needed someone more experienced to make the decision. Truth be told, Song Yunxin himself didn't even know what was going on around him. He was caught in a daze. However, there was one thing he could guarantee. Whatever happened around him had nothing to do with him. He sneered, "You don't have to threaten me. I didn't do anything around here on my way here." Since the High Deacon had said that, He Zhenquang wouldn't be blamed if anything happened. He nodded and said, "My Heartless Palace is willing to vouch for High Deacon. That's great." General Liu waved his hand and said, "Since I've vouched for him, you can leave now." The matter was easily resolved. He Zhenquang cupped his hands to express his gratitude. Then, he turned to Song Yunxin and extended his hand toward the door. "High Deacon, please." "No hurry." Song Yunxin pressed his hand down and stared at the door. He said in a deep voice, "You Qianqiu travel with me. I can guarantee that he didn't do anything around here. Please let him go. The innocent are innocent, and the guilty are innocent. I have to follow all the necessary procedures. Otherwise, wouldn't I be suspected of corruption? I will treat High Deacon Song's words as testimony. If there's nothing wrong, I will naturally let him go. Please don't interfere with my interrogation." General Liu extended his hand toward the door and said, "I won't see you out." Song Yunxin's eyes turned cold. He wanted to stay and wait for you Qianqiu to come out. However, a bitter expression flashed across He Zhenquang's face. How could the upper echelons of the sect know the difficulties of the subordinates outside? The Dark Nether Army had already given him enough face by making concessions. If he continued to contradict them, his days here would be difficult. After all, this was their territory. The Dark Nether Army would definitely make things difficult for him. If he couldn't handle the matters here well, he wouldn't be able to explain to the sect. He coughed and cupped his hands toward Song Yunxin. "High Deacon, we might as well wait outside the door." Song Yunxin was slightly startled. He was also someone who often worked outside. He was not ignorant of the difficulties of the subordinates like He Zhenquang thought. After thinking about it, there shouldn't be any problems. He glanced at General Liu, who was sitting high above, then turned and strode out. He Zhenquang breathed a sigh of relief, cupped his hands again, and quickly followed. As soon as they left the city guard mansion, they saw a group of people watching the show. Shenyu, who was in the crowd, hurriedly walked over to Song Yunxin and asked, "How is you Qianqiu?" In fact, as soon as Song Yunxin was escorted out of the dungeon, Mu Bing and the others, led by Dong Lai Shun, came out of a house not far away. The shackles on their hands and feet were long gone. The two soldiers accompanying them quickly gestured for the guards to open the cell door. The group quickly entered the dungeon. Inside the cell, Yu Qianqiu was bored alone. He paced around the small space with his hands behind his back, his head lowered and his brows furrowed as he thought about some problems. He wasn't worried about any accidents at all. With his ability, this cell could trap other cultivators, but it was useless against him. He could leave at any time, and it was no different from a piece of paper. Clang! The sound of the cell door opening pulled him back from his thoughts. It was probably time for him to go to court. However, he heard footsteps along the way. It wasn't like before, where there were only 2 soldiers. There seemed to be 7 or 8 people. While he was pondering, the 7 or 8 people had already arrived in front of the cell. They were all familiar faces, and they were all sneering at him. They looked at him as if he was a pig that was about to be slaughtered. Mu Bing, who was in the crowd, laughed evilly and said, "You Chincho, I told you that no matter how sharp-tongued you are, there will be a time when you cry. Even in your dreams, you probably never imagined that this moment would come so quickly." Yu Qianshou was slightly stunned. He saw that the shackles on their hands and feet were gone, and that the 2 soldiers were fighting on the side. With his experience in this area, he immediately guessed the cause and effect. He knew that he had fallen into a trap. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly, and he said, "It is indeed a good plan. Step by step, you paralyzed us and successfully made us lower our guard. Finally, as you wished, Song Yunxin was lured away." His gaze then fell on Mu Bing, and he sneered with unusual disdain. "Mu Bing, it's not that I look down on you, but with that pig brain of yours and that little bit of knowledge of yours, you can't come up with such an overt scheme. So, what the F***ck are you so proud of?" Chapter 1038. These words were a resounding slap to the face. Every word was like a sharp blade, stabbing into his heart. This was because this method was indeed not thought of by him. His words were like a sharp blade, stabbing into the pit of his heart. He could not pull it out even if he wanted to. Thus, his face turned green. He simply had no reason to refute Yu Qianshou. He could only gnash his teeth and speak with a sinister expression. "Yu Qianshou, I'll let you know what it means to be unable to live or die." "Beg for death?" Yu Qianshou sneered. "Don't worry, no matter who I beg for, it won't come to you." He raised his hand and pinched his little finger. "Who in the 3 realms doesn't know that you're a bastard who sells his daughter for glory? Poor Mu Tianjiao traded her body for this vanity, but you don't cherish it. You even want to show it off. Are you afraid that others don't know how shameless you are? Why don't you think about it? With your little ability, how could you find so many people to help you?" Previously, he was still worried about Wu Xiong's face and didn't want to scold the couple. But now that things had come to this, the dagger was revealed. The other party had already made it clear that they wanted to take his little life. Even if he showed mercy, it wouldn't be worth a fart. Now, it was either you die or I live. There was no way out. "Capture him alive. Capture him alive. I want to kill him with my own hands." Mu Bing roared as he pointed at the cell. He really couldn't find words more vicious than Yu Qianshou's to scold Yu Qianshou. The others looked at him with a hint of pity. "Since you know he has a sharp tongue, why do you keep jumping out to provoke him? Today I want to see who will kill who." Yu Qianshou sneered. There was no wind in the cell, but his clothes suddenly fluttered. Boundless killing intent instantly exploded. "Do you want to fight like a cornered beast? You overestimate yourself." Dong Shunlai maintained a smile, but his hands suddenly elongated and shot out like 2 thin bamboo poles. With a whoosh, they passed through the cage, and the 2 palms at the front suddenly turned into 2 sharp claws. One clawed at Yu Qianshou's head, and the other clawed at Yu Qianshou's chest. He wanted to kill Yu Qianshou in one strike. He did not care whether Mu Bing wanted to capture him alive or not. He wanted to settle the matter first. Otherwise, there would be trouble. It wasn't easy to trick Gray Cloud Xin into leaving, and they couldn't afford to waste too much time. If they waited for Gray Cloud Xin to react and rush over, and they still hadn't left, then none of them would be able to leave. The Heartless Palace's 3-in-1 sword drawing style was no joke. The sneak attack of an expert at the initial stage of the Netherworld Emperor was so fast that Yu Qianshou couldn't dodge it. However, his opponents outnumbered him, and all of them were highly skilled swordsmen. How could he not be prepared when facing them alone? Thousands of purple flame high-energy sabers had been secretly arranged around his body under the cover of the explosive, murderous aura. "Kill!" Yuchincho yelled fiercely. Thousands of invisible purple flame high-energy sabers spun and attacked at the same time. Puff, puff. A series of tearing sounds could be heard. The two pairs of ghostly claws that were as fast as lightning were shredded into thousands of pieces, falling to the ground and turning into wisps of gray smoke. Ugh! Dong Shunlai let out a muffled groan. The pair of ghostly claws that had been shredded quickly retracted and grew back at a visible speed. His eyes were filled with disbelief as he glanced around the prison. His pair of ghostly claws were extremely sharp and hard. How could they be destroyed by ordinary objects? He could clearly feel that the prison was filled with sharp objects of extreme yang, which were simply his natural nemesis. Not only him, but the others were also startled. They didn't expect that Dong Shunlai, who was at the initial stage of the Netherworld Emperor, would suffer a great loss in just one round. When 1,000 purple flame high-energy sabers were brandished, the terrifying energy surged forward, making the ghosts and monsters of the underworld tremble with fear. Since he had already attacked, Yu Qianqiu wouldn't show any mercy based on his personality. His 5 fingers stretched out like claws toward the outside of the prison, and he yelled fiercely again, "Kill!" Thousands of purple flame high-energy sabers shot out like a rain of swords from the metal bars. However, the surprise effect had already disappeared. Dong Shunlai's new pair of ghostly claws quickly pushed out, and a black, translucent wall of light immediately blocked in front of him. Immediately, the outline of the flying daggers appeared on the wall of light, and it began to protrude forward. Dong Shunlai resisted the rainstorm-like purple flame high-energy sabers with his powerful cultivation. However, the black, transparent wall of light was gradually being broken through. Dong Shunlai said hurriedly, "This kid's item is the nemesis of my meditation cultivation. I can't hold on much longer. You guys should kill him while I'm blocking his treasure." He still thought that Yu Qianqiu had used some kind of treasure. The dumbfounded crowd immediately came back to their senses. Mu Bing was terrified. He didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to be so powerful that even an expert in the preliminary stage of the Netherworld Emperor realm couldn't hold on much longer. Mu Bing was slowly moving to one side, showing signs of fleeing. However, Yu Qianqiu's trump cards came one after the other. It was fine if he didn't reveal them, but once he revealed them, they were all extraordinary. How could an ordinary expert block them? If he didn't have a trump card, he wouldn't have dared to run around. Now that he had been attacked, he couldn't pretend to be a coward anymore. If he still showed mercy, he would be a pig, unless he didn't want to live anymore. For a moment, Yu Qianqiu didn't conceal his murderous intent at all. Seeing his opponents about to gang up on him, and Mu Bing showing signs of fleeing, Yu Qianqiu's eyes widened. How could he let Mu Bing run away? Kill! With a third roar, Yu Qianqiu pushed out his palms fiercely, as if he wanted to rush out of the cage. His whole body emitted a dazzling purple light, and thousands of flying swords of purple flames shot out from his body, covering the entire area and attacking indiscriminately. Within such a short distance, the metal fence in front of Yu Qianqiu was instantly smashed into pieces by the sharp flying swords of purple flames. What were these things? The crowd turned pale with fright. They didn't expect these flying swords to be so sharp. They had thought that after they trapped Yu Qianqiu in the dungeon, Yu Qianqiu was no different from a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, they found out that the narrow space also limited their chances of escaping. The swarming purple flying swords closed in on a large area like a bowl cover. It was obvious that his opponent wanted to kill them all at once. The only place he could escape to was the wall behind him. The black wall of light that blocked the purple flame-high-energy blade couldn't stop the indiscriminate bombardment of the flying swords of purple flames and was instantly smashed to pieces. Dong Shunlai could no longer laugh, and his face was full of shock. He didn't know that if he was a cultivator from the immortal world, he might be able to block it with his profound cultivation. However, these flying swords of pure yang were the bane of meditation cultivators, and it was very difficult for him to block them with his current cultivation. There was a loud boom behind him as the other meditation cultivators worked together to blast a large hole in the wall. It was a few hundred meters deep, and the plaza outside collapsed as a large hole appeared. Almost at the same time that the hole appeared, Yu Qianqiu spread his fingers and used the Earth's secret art. The hole collapsed with a boom, almost burying those who wanted to enter it alive. Yu Qianqiu had clearly gone berserk. He wanted to trap everyone with a mere minor immortal cultivation and fight so many experts by himself. A miserable scream came from the other side. Mu Bing's cultivation was low, and he didn't have time to dodge at such a close distance. Several flying swords pierced through his intestines, and he fell to the ground. "Help!" he cried out, but no one had the time to care about him. The ground wriggled and swallowed him whole. Everything seemed to have happened slowly, but in fact, everything happened very quickly. It happened in the blink of an eye. Dong Shunlai roared, and his tyrannical cultivation erupted on the spot. Fierce astral energy instantly swept toward the flying swords of purple flames. He punched out with both fists, and a solid astral energy shot toward Yu Qianqiu. Immediately, the weakness of Yu Qianqiu's low cultivation was exposed. If the flying swords of purple flames had been used by an immortal emperor, they would have died for sure. However, Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was far too low compared to theirs. The fierce chaotic wind disturbed the flying swords on the spot, especially the chaotic wind formed by his fists with the cultivation of the early stage of the Underworld Emperor. The chaotic wind blasted the flying swords of the purple flames away in all directions. The cultivation of the early stage of the Netherworld Emperor realm was not child's play. Once it was displayed, the earth shook and the mountains shook. The entire dungeon collapsed in an instant, and for a moment, the earth and rocks became a blur, and the sound of rumbling could be heard. At the place where the two fists landed, the metal fences were directly broken, and the wall behind them was instantly blasted away by the unparalleled power. On the ground outside, in a straight line of 1,000 meters, all the houses made of boulders were blown into the sky by the tremendous force. A deep trench appeared on the ground. Then countless rocks and stones fell from the sky like rain. People were fleeing in all directions. Those with low cultivation bases were not able to dodge in time. They were directly smashed into meat paste by the aftershock of the two fists that came out from the ground. The golden light suddenly appeared and wrapped around Yu Qianqiu, but he was still blasted into the hole behind him like a meteor by the heavy fists, capture him, and use him as a hostage. Dong Shunlai waved his hand, sweeping away the falling rocks and soil, creating a short gap. He snorted coldly and dashed towards the hole he had created in the ground, chasing after them. When the others saw that the purple flame flying sword wasn't unstoppable, their confidence was boosted, and they almost followed suit. The 7 of them chased after Yu Qianqiu. In the blink of an eye, the people who were watching the commotion outside the city guard's mansion were startled by a loud noise. A large hole suddenly appeared in the square behind them, and rocks and stones flew everywhere like rain. Most of the people immediately hid in the air. Waiting outside the door, Songyun Xian wasn't a fool. He realized that he had fallen into a trap after thinking for a while. It seemed that someone had made a move in the dungeon. Bang! Songyun Xian was extremely angry, and his thunderous roar shook the minds of the onlookers in the sky. Shin Yu and He Zhengquang, who were next to him, took a few steps back. Blood even seeped out of their mouths and noses, and their faces instantly turned pale. As soon as Songyun Xian dodged into the sky, he heard another loud boom behind the dungeon. 100-meter deep, 1,000-meter-long trench suddenly appeared. The houses that were built on top of the trench were instantly blown into the sky, and the onlookers dodged in all directions, screaming miserably. Chapter 1039. Songyun Xian's expression changed drastically. With his eyesight, He could immediately tell that this was the aftershock of an expert's attack. The attacker was at least an early-stage immortal emperor. Apart from General Liu, only Dong Laishan had such a cultivation. General Liu, who was sitting in the main hall of the city guard's mansion waiting for news, was similarly shocked when he felt the violent tremor. He got up and smashed the stone table in front of him. He looked at his men standing below and said in a low voice, "What's going on? Why did you cause such a huge commotion just to deal with an early-stage minor immortal cultivator? Are you afraid that Sangyan Xian won't know?" Flustered and exasperated, he disappeared from the main hall in a flash. As soon as he appeared in the air, he saw Sangyan Xian glaring at him angrily. Fortunately, Sangyan Xian wasn't in the mood to deal with him. Saving Yu Qianqiu was his top priority, so he shot away in a flash. Golden Umbrella. Dong Shunlai, who had chased into the cave, cried out. A large golden umbrella lay on its side on the ground. Yu Qianqiu was lying on the ground, hugging the handle of the umbrella and coughing. He coughed and coughed, mouthful after mouthful of blood. His entire body was enveloped by the faint golden light emitted by the golden umbrella. Although he looked heavily injured, there wasn't a single wound on his body. Golden Umbrella. The people who chased after him also cried out. Although they hadn't seen the Golden Umbrella before, they had heard of it. It was one of the few defensive magic treasures in the immortal world. The shape of the umbrella was so obvious that anyone with a bit of experience would be able to tell that it was a golden umbrella. It's too late. Count himself lucky. Let's go. Dong Shunlai called out. They quickly shot towards a hole in the ground tens of meters away. They knew that they wouldn't be able to break the golden umbrella in a short time. If this dragged on, none of them would be able to escape from Sangyan Xian. However, Dong Shunlai didn't give up. As he shot up, he threw a heavy punch at the golden umbrella below. F***CK. Yu Qianqiu, who was inside the golden umbrella, let out a strange cry. He had overestimated the power of the golden umbrella, thinking that he would be fine as long as he hid inside it. He didn't expect that the cultivation base of the early stage of the Underworld Emperor realm was too frightening. Even though it didn't break through the defense of the golden umbrella, Yu Qianqiu was shaken badly. If he were to be hit again, Yu Qianqiu really suspected that he would be jolted to death. How could he dare to take it head-on? Almost at the same time the heavy punch landed, he hid back into Utopia with his umbrella. Boom! The entire Twilight City shook violently. Almost at the same time, a huge hole appeared in the ground. Dong Shunlai didn't even bother to check if he had hit him. Just as he was about to escape into the sky, a mournful cry suddenly erupted from the large hole that had been blasted open. Xianixin, F***CK your ancestors. They want to run. Stop them for your father. Don't let a single one of them escape. Although the voice came from underground, the hysterical anger had faintly penetrated the ground. Everyone outside could hear it clearly. Everyone could tell that it was a roar with all his strength. He really isn't dead. Dong Shunlai's expression twitched. He wanted to turn back and beat him up a few more times, but there was no time. If he didn't escape now, when would he? Sangyan Xian, who was rushing over, immediately understood what it meant when he heard they want to run. He wasn't angry at all about F***king his ancestors. When he heard that Yu Qianqiu was cursing with such vigor, his spirit was lifted. That guy was obviously still alive and didn't have time to listen to what he said next. As his eyes flashed, he immediately saw 7 streams of light shooting out from the ravine hundreds of meters away. They scattered in a fan shape and fled. It was a smart idea. It all depended on who was unlucky or lucky. Bang. Sangyan Xian's roar resounded through the world. He wanted to catch 7 people who were running away. He wasn't sure if he could, but he was sure that he could kill 7 dead people. Clang! A soft sound reverberated through the world. Even the air between heaven and earth trembled slightly. A dazzling white light came out from his sleeve and instantly illuminated the entire Twilight City. The people who were used to the darkness found it difficult to adapt to such a dazzling light. They subconsciously raised their sleeves to cover their faces or close their eyes. They could only hear the roaring wind in their ears. Those who were close to the light were instantly swept away by the strong airflow. Dong Shunlai and the others who were scattering in all directions only saw a vast expanse of whiteness. They immediately sensed a powerful aura that blotted out the sky and covered the earth behind them. Looking back in fear, they saw a powerful beam of light sweeping towards them at an unbelievable speed. The aura that assaulted their faces was suffocating and forcefully poured into their lungs. They couldn't even block it. The 7 of them were scared out of their wits. Almost subconsciously, they used all of their cultivation to form a protective aura shield. However, the protective aura shield was easily destroyed like an eggshell. The 7 of them spat out a mouthful of blood and were instantly swallowed by the strong light that swept across. The 7 screams were swallowed as soon as they sounded. Many people who were watching from behind did not have time to escape. Suddenly, shrill screams rang out, but they were swallowed in the blink of an eye. Rumble! The earth trembled as if the sky and earth were about to be turned upside down. When the strong light disappeared, the world returned to calm. The people who were hiding in the air slowly opened their eyes and suddenly became dumbfounded. Half of Twilight City, which covered an area of dozens of miles, had collapsed starting from near the central square, especially in the direction where Sangyin Xin was facing. 1/3 of the city walls that were spread out in a fan shape were instantly smashed into powder. Not even a complete stone could be seen. On both sides of the fan shape were large collapsed houses. Dozens of mountains dozens of miles away had been razed to the ground. Smoke and smoke filled the air for a long time. Song Yunshin floated silently in the air, silently adjusting his aura. Pulling out the sword had consumed a lot of his cultivation base. He stared coldly in front of him, his right hand holding the sword horizontally in a slanted manner. This sword was not like an ordinary flying sword. The blade was longer and wider, and the temperature seemed to be very high. It was enshrouded in a dense white mist that curled up and dissipated. Finally, the blade slowly turned from white to clear, like a pool of autumn water. At a glance, one could tell that it was not an ordinary sword. Otherwise, it would not have been able to withstand such a powerful force. Could this be the Heartless Palace's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style? Some whispers sounded, and countless horrified eyes looked at Sangyin Xin. They were filled with disbelief. They could not imagine that the power of one person could burst out such a powerful force. Looking at the dust-filled area in front of him, there was not a single figure to be seen. From the miserable cries earlier, it was obvious that besides the 7 people who had fled, there were countless others who had been annihilated by this sword strike. In fact, Sangyin Xin did not want to kill innocent people, but after the power of that sword was released, he could not control the killing range. He would not stop until the power was completely exhausted. Shun Yu was dumbfounded. He did not expect to have such a powerful master by his side these days. This was the Sect's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style. He Jinquang could not suppress the excitement on his face. He had long heard that the Sect leader Wang Qing's 3 swords in 1 sword draw style was extraordinary, but he had never had the chance to see it for himself. It turned out that its power was so terrifying. General Liu looked at Sangyin Xin with a gloomy expression. He could not suppress the chill in his heart. Although his armored subordinates were flying behind him, he knew that no matter how many of them there were, they would not be able to block that sword. In the cave below, Yu Qianqiu had just flashed out of the deep pit when he heard a thunderous roar of slaughter pushing into the distance. Even the ground was violently trembling, and the commotion was extremely frightening. When the commotion completely disappeared, he discovered that more than half of his body had been buried by the collapsed soil. He quickly flashed out, rubbed his chest, and coughed out another mouthful of blood. He spread his arms, and the scattered purple flame, flying swords, all drilled out of the soil and returned to his body. Then, he looked around and quickly sank into the ground, entering a spherical space a few hundred meters underground. He saw Mu Bing lying on the ground, applying medicine on the wound on his stomach. He was still moaning in pain. "Mu Bing, I'm so happy to see you again." Yu Qianqiu took a step forward, raised his foot, and directly stepped on Mu Bing's stomach, which was covered with both hands. Mu Bing's 10 fingers, as well as the medicine bottle, were stomped into the cracked belly. Blood immediately spurted out of the slightly healed wound. The miserable scream was shrill and piercing, making one's hair stand on end. Yu Qianqiu was not moved at all. He forcefully twisted his foot again until both of Mu Bing's palms were completely stuffed into his cracked belly. Then, he sneered and said, "Didn't you say that there would be a time for me to cry? I'm waiting for you to explode your dantian." When? Mu Bing was in so much pain that he could not catch his breath. How could he have the guts to destroy his body and soul? He looked at Yu Qianqiu in horror, gasping for breath, and said, "Yu Qianqiu, spare me as long as you let me go. I'll do anything in the future. With Wu Xiong's help? No. No one in the immortal world will dare touch you. Who does Wu Xiong think he is?" Yu Qianqiu laughed coldly. His right hand pulled out a long sword made of azure fire. He waved the tip of the sword in front of Mu Bing's eyes and said, "Tell me the truth. Why did you come to the netherworld this time?" He still thought that Mu Bing was hiding some secret, but at this time, how could Mu Bing still dare to say that he was here to kill him? But in this moment of hesitation, Yu Qianqiu swung the long sword in his hand and chopped off both of Mu Bing's legs, starting from the ankles. Ugh! Mu Bing's forehead was instantly covered in sweat. His body twisted slightly, and the blood in his abdomen flowed even faster. "Still talking back to me?" Yu Qianqiu sneered and swung the long sword in his hand again, chopping off 2 more legs from the knees. Mu Bing screamed and replied impatiently, "Kill you. Hunt you down. I came to hunt you down." "Hunt me down? You think you can find so many netherworld experts to hunt me down?" Yu Qianqiu moved the sword in his hand, and the tip hovered over Mu Bing's eyes. He said indifferently, "Without Wu Xiong's support, you wouldn't have been able to find so many netherworld experts to help you. Wu Xiong wouldn't go against the immortal emperor just to kill me, right? If you don't tell me the truth, I'll gouge out one of your eyeballs. Do you believe me?" Chapter 1040. Mu Bing's pupils shrank as the blade swayed slightly in front of his eyes. He had no doubt that Yu Qianqiu was joking. If he was unhappy, Yu Qianqiu's sword would gouge out one of his eyeballs. He hurriedly said, "I deliberately told Wu Xiong that you had once pursued Tianjiao, and that the relationship between the two of you had always been ambiguous. This aroused Wu Xiong's jealousy and made him use his power to help me kill you." Yu Qianqiu choked and was speechless. Let's not talk about whether or not he had an ambiguous relationship with Mu Tianjiao. Even if he did, was this something that a father could say? Not to mention that he didn't. He really couldn't imagine that a father would slander his own daughter's reputation like this. Not to mention him, even the dead Dong Shunlai would never have thought that the problem he couldn't figure out before was actually caused by Wu Xiong's jealousy. It should be known that sometimes, no matter how shrewd a man was, he couldn't stand his woman having an ambiguous relationship with another man. Because of this, he would often do something impulsive that he would regret. So that's how it is. Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. He didn't think that Mu Bing was lying. He slowly let out a breath and said, "I give up. You're even slandering your own daughter. Let me ask you, does Mu Tianjiao know that you came to kill me?" "No. Wu Xiong, and I hid it from her. If she knew, she definitely wouldn't agree," Mu Bing replied hurriedly. He blurted it out without thinking, fearing that he would be killed if he didn't answer in time. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu finally felt a little better. Fortunately, he didn't misjudge Mu Tianjiao. It should be known that in his eyes, Mu Tianjiao had always been a woman who was not inferior to men. She wouldn't be so narrow-minded. It would be really disgusting if he met a family of ingrates. The sword in his hand moved away from Mu Bing's eyeballs. He patted Mu Bing's face with the blade and said, "I just can't figure it out. How did I offend you? How could you be so vengeful? Even though I'm in the underworld, you still chase after me at all costs. Why?" Mu Bing suddenly laughed miserably. He laughed so hard that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He said in a hoarse voice, "Although I'm incompetent, how can I not see through my daughter's thoughts after raising her for so many years? Who in the world knows her better than I do?" Back then, when the two of you left the Divine Ruin Realm, I could tell that Tian Jiao had fallen in love with you. If the two of you were a couple, it would be fine. But now she is married to Wu Xiong. Who is Wu Xiong? He was someone who could be considered powerful even in the Immortal Palace. It was one thing for the lass to go to the World Chamber of Commerce to support you, but she even invited you to the wedding. What kind of occasion was that? It's too obvious. I'm scared. I'm afraid that the lass will do something impulsive and ruin her hard-won happiness. Yu Qianshou was stunned. He somewhat understood. No wonder this old dog deliberately humiliated him at Mu Tianjiao's wedding. So this was the reason. The sword patted his face again and said, "But you don't have to tarnish your own daughter's reputation. Aren't you afraid that Wu Xiong's misunderstanding will deepen and ruin your daughter's happiness? As long as you're dead, the lass will stop thinking. I believe that the lass will have a good relationship with Wu Xiong, because the lass's chastity is the best bargaining chip." Mu Bing suddenly roared with a ferocious expression. "And the most important point is that I can't stand the sight of you. I, Mu Bing, have suffered for so many years in the immortal world before I can make a name for myself. Why is it that you, a poor boy with nothing, can live better than me? It will be fine if you had a good birth and a good background. But you were just a subordinate of my 4-Links Chamber of Commerce. Damn it. I'm afraid that what you said before was just an excuse to comfort yourself. It's true that you're jealous of me. You dog, who do you think you are to compare yourself with me? Who asked you to be so arrogant?" Mu Bing's right eyeball flew out with a flick of the sword in his hand. "Who asked you to look down on me?" The sword in his hand flicked again, and Mu Bing's left eyeball popped out again. "Ah, Yu Qianshou." Before Mu Bing could finish roaring in pain, Yu Qianshou stabbed his sword into his mouth and chewed his tongue. He sneered and said, "Who asked you to shout at me?" Mu Bing's head tilted and he fainted from the pain. Just as Yu Qianshou pulled out his sword, he suddenly heard someone shouting, "Yu Qianshou, where are you?" He couldn't help but be stunned. He thought that was Mu Bing, whose tongue had been chewed up, who was talking. After listening carefully, he realized that it was Ash Gray Cloud Xian's voice. He immediately looked up and muttered, "This old man has such a good voice. I can still hear him even though I'm hiding so deep underground." With a swing of the sword in his hand, he chopped off the head of the unconscious Mu Bing. Then, he put away the blue fire flying sword and bent down to grab the bun on Mu Bing's head. Then, he quickly burrowed into the soil above his head. Ash Gray Cloud Xian, who had already burrowed into the half-collapsed underground cave, shouted frantically. He was cleaning up the collapsed area while searching for Yu Qianshou. He had clearly heard Yu Qianshou's scolding voice earlier, so why wasn't there any reaction now? If Yu Qianshou died, he would have to prepare to hide in the netherworld and escape for his life. He wouldn't be able to return to the immortal realm for the rest of his life. Not only would he have to pay back the Passionless Palace, he would also have to face the constant pursuit. How he wished that Yu Qianshou would scold him again. It didn't matter how vicious the scolding was, as long as he wasn't dead. Suddenly, Ash Gray Cloud Xian's sharp divine sense detected some movement in the collapsed area in front of him. He was delighted to see Yu Qianshou bursting out from the ground, holding a bloody head in his hand. It was Mu Bing's. Ash Gray Cloud Xian quickly suppressed the pleasant surprise on his face and said with a cold expression, "Did you kill Mu Bing?" However, he was astonished inwardly. Even after being attacked by several meditation practitioners, including a netherworld emperor at the preliminary stage, they still couldn't kill him. It was a miracle that this guy was still alive. Half of Yu Qianshou's body was covered in blood. He shook the head in his hand and said with a cold smile, "Do you think he came for me? You are very wrong. I have just interrogated him. The person he wanted to kill is indeed me, but it was Wu Xiong who played tricks behind the scenes. The real target is your heartless palace. I don't know how your heartless palace offended Wu Xiong. Damn it. He wanted to kill me to use the powerful force of the immortal palace to eradicate your heartless palace. I am so unlucky. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have asked the heartless palace to protect me. Don't talk nonsense here. Do you think I will believe your provocation? Ash Gray Cloud Xin was shocked, but he still said coldly, "It is you who offended Mu Bing. Mu Bing is here for revenge. Touch your conscience when you say this." Yu Qianqiu patted his chest and lifted Mu Bing's head. He sneered, "Let's not talk about the others. Do you think he can find an early-stage underworld emperor to help him? In fact, you know that Wu Xiong is behind this. Without Wu Xiong's support, it is still a question whether he can come to Twilight City." Ash Gray Cloud Xian didn't care. "You have the Immortal Emperor's decree on you. Wu Xiong doesn't have the guts to oppose the Immortal Emperor." "That's right. Although Mu Bing has confessed, I don't understand what you said. Wu Xiong is a member of the Immortal Palace. Why would he take the lead to oppose the Immortal Emperor? Could it be that he was tired of living? I don't get it. Yu Qianqiu shook his head. Suddenly, he was startled and revealed a suspicious expression. "I say, old Ash Gray, do you think the Immortal Palace doesn't want your heartless palace to grow, so they sent me here to compose a song? In reality, it was all planned. They just wanted to sacrifice me to find an excuse to take care of the heartless palace in the open." Ash Gray Cloud Xin couldn't hide the shock in his eyes. He even suspected that the Immortal Palace was aware of Sect Master Wang Qing's secret, so they planned this. However, he thought of a suspicious point and calmed down in the blink of an eye. He snorted, "Don't try to sow discord here. You were the one who wanted me to protect you. So the Immortal Palace gave the decree to the Heartless Palace. Could it be that you have already colluded with the Immortal Palace and even sacrificed your life to be loyal to the Immortal Palace? It would have been fine if you didn't say it, but I'm even more suspicious now." Yu Qianqiu rubbed his blood-stained chin. "You know about the Great Bright Wheel, right? What does this have to do with the Great Bright Wheel?" Ash Gray Cloud Xian squinted his eyes and asked, "The Immortal Emperor ordered me to compose a song, and the person who passed the decree was the Great Bright Wheel. What's so strange about that? The Great Bright Wheel is in charge of the Immortal World Commerce Alliance, and the illusionary Immortal City is his territory. Your World Commerce Alliance is in his territory, so it's normal to find him to pass the decree," Ash Gray Cloud Xian said calmly. "That's normal, but now that I think about it, the most abnormal thing is that he was the one who asked me to come out to collect new things. When I was worried that we would become enemies and that you would secretly plot against me, he suggested that I find you to protect me. He said that you have mastered the Heartless Palace's 3 swords into 1 sword drawing style. With your protection, few people in the world can touch me, so it's definitely safe." Yu Qianqiu put his head behind his back and said suspiciously, "And I was worried that you wouldn't agree, but he told me to find you first. If you didn't agree, he would think of a way to ask for a decree from the Immortal Palace and have the Heartless Palace's Sect Master Wang Qing pressure you. At that time, you would have no choice but to agree. Because he is friends with Yin Peng and Wei Chunxiu, I believed him. You know what happened next?" Ash Gray Cloud Xian was shocked when he heard this, and he gritted his teeth as he muttered to himself. "So this was all a trap that was already planned. F***CK? I only realized it now. I clearly knew that if I begged you, you definitely wouldn't agree to protect me, but I was still foolishly tricked by him to find you, thinking that I could disgust you. Now that I think about it, the advantage of doing this is to get rid of their suspicion. It's easy to announce to the public that I begged you, but couldn't, so I begged the Immortal Palace. And for the Immortal Emperor's wedding, the Immortal Palace had no choice but to fulfill my request and send a decree to the Heartless Palace." Chapter 1041. At this point, Yu Qianqiu suddenly took out his empty hand from his back and slapped his thigh. He exclaimed in shock, "Oh my God! The Chamber of Commerce's Great Bright Wheel Master, the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Commander Wu Xiong, and they even mobilized an early-stage Underworld Emperor expert in the Underworld. Even the Dark Army is involved. Could it be that such a large force is working together just to kill me. Yu Qianqiu? What a joke. They think too highly of me. Yu Qianqiu. He frowned and turned to Song Yunshin, who was frowning in thought. He hit his chest with the back of his hand and asked, "Old Song, help me analyze this. You see, such a large force is definitely not something an ordinary person can control. Do you think that immortal Emperor Jintai is behind all this? Otherwise, who would be able to mobilize these people?" Your expression changed. Could I have guessed correctly? Is it really against your heartless palace? Then I'm being wronged. Song Yunshin's expression did change. After being analyzed by Yu Yang's vicious mouth and the facts laid out in front of him, it was hard not to believe it. He couldn't help but connect all the things that had happened from start to finish and think about it. The immortal emperor suddenly issued a decree to a small world chamber of commerce master to have him compose for the immortal emperor's wedding. This was an unimaginable matter, and many people still couldn't understand it. Then, the Great Bright Will instigated Yu Qianqiu to seek his protection. This was believable. Unless Yu Qianqiu was an idiot, he would be able to figure it out even if he used his ass to think. It was absolutely impossible for Yu Qianqiu to agree. If it wasn't for someone's instigation, if Yu Qianqiu really wanted Yi Futian to protect him, he could have directly asked the Immortal Palace for help. Why did he have to go around in a roundabout way to humiliate himself and then ask the Immortal Palace for help? Was there something wrong with his brain? With this scoundrel's craftiness, he definitely wouldn't do such a stupid thing. The Great Bright Will clearly wanted to get rid of the suspicion that the Immortal Palace was behind this. At the same time, the Sect happened to monitor the Great Bright Will visiting the World Chamber of Commerce several times. Normally, it would be difficult for a large sect to invite him, let alone visit the World Chamber of Commerce so frequently. After he refused, the Immortal Palace used Yu Qianqiu's mouth to issue a decree to the Heartless Palace to force him to protect Yu Qianqiu. The most ridiculous thing was that when something happened to a minor character like Yu Qianqiu, the entire Heartless Palace would be implicated. The reason was that he was afraid he wouldn't protect Yu Qianqiu and would miss the Immortal Emperor's wedding ceremony. The decree was equivalent to the Heartless Palace falling into a trap. The rest would be easy. They just had to kill Yu Qianqiu. The reason why they were beating around the bush was that the Immortal Palace wanted to find a justifiable excuse to attack the Heartless Palace. Otherwise, they were afraid that the sects in the celestial world would be in a state of panic, which would be detrimental to their rule. It should be known that the previous few top sects in the celestial world had been eliminated by the Immortal Palace with a justifiable excuse. The higher-ups of the Heartless Palace, led by Sect Master Wang Qing, had already expected this. However, they didn't expect it to be this fast. The Immortal Palace was already prepared to act. Looks like I've really been implicated by the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianqiu stared at Gray Cloud Xin and gritted his teeth. In his heart, he was secretly apologizing to Great Bright Lun. In order to increase his credibility, he hoped that Great Bright Lun would understand. At the same time, he felt that Great Bright Lun should be able to understand. Anyway, now that things had come to this, he understood that he wasn't just Gray Cloud Xion's enemy. The Heartless Palace wouldn't let him go either. Thus, he took this opportunity to provoke the Heartless Palace. If he could force the Heartless Palace to rebel, then the Immortal Palace would help him take care of this troublesome matter. The Heartless Palace wouldn't just sit and wait for death. They were a bunch of powerful people. Implicated you? If I didn't save you, you'd be dead. Gray Cloud Xin quickly regained his composure. He didn't admit or deny that the Immortal Palace was targeting the Heartless Palace. He naturally wouldn't spread this kind of thing. Instead, he stared at Yu Qianqiu and sneered. You killed Wu Xiong's father-in-law. You should think about how to explain this to Wu Xiong. What do I have to explain to him? Who saw me kill Mu Bing? Yu Qianqiu raised Mu Bing's head and sneered. It was clearly those people from Dongshan who killed Mu Bing. Don't act like nothing happened. You and I both know the reason behind this. The Immortal Palace must also know that we killed him. Not only will framing me benefit, but it will also buy time for the Heartless Palace to prepare. As long as the cover isn't lifted, the Immortal Palace won't have a legitimate reason to act against the Heartless Palace. You should be thanking me. Although he said this, only he knew the real reason. Once the news of Mu Bing's death reached the immortal world, as long as Wu Xiong wasn't stupid, he should know that Wu Xiong dared to kill his father-in-law. Wu Xiong would naturally understand that Wu Xiong had something on him. If Wu Xiong still acted rashly, then he would try and see what the consequences would be if the immortal emperor found out. Wu Xiong should know which was more important. Currently, the one who posed the least threat was Wu Xiong. Hearing this, Sun Xian's eyes flickered. Although he didn't say anything, he understood that at the moment, this was indeed the best way to prevent the Immortal Palace from directly acting against the Heartless Palace. Just as Yu Qianqiu said, it could delay the outbreak of the crisis and allow the Heartless Palace to make more preparations. After letting out a slight sigh, he looked at Yu Qianqiu, whose chest and mouth were covered in blood. He frowned slightly and said, "You're injured like this. Are you all right?" To him, Yu Qianqiu couldn't have anything happen to Yu Qianqiu, especially after he thought he knew the truth about the Immortal Palace targeting the Heartless Palace. Yu Qianqiu touched the blood scab on his chin and smiled sheepishly. "It's not the first time I've been injured. Injuries, I get used to them. I recover quickly. I'm almost healed." Sun Xian was stunned. He looked him up and down with some disbelief. Anyone who was beaten to the point of vomiting so much blood, how could they recover so quickly? Seeing that he didn't believe him, Yu Qianqiu didn't want to reveal the miraculous effects of the golden bead to him. He quickly shook the head in his hand and changed the topic. "Let's go. It's time to let the people outside know the truth." He flashed towards the exit, and Sun Xian followed after the two of them flashed out of the ground. Yu Qianqiu flew directly to the broken statue standing in the center of Twilight City, ignoring the surprised and doubtful gazes around him. He landed on the top of the giant statue, looked around, and immediately stared speechlessly at the ruins of half of the city. After a while, he tilted his head and looked at Sun Xian, who had landed beside him. He guessed that this old man had pulled out that shocking sword to scare people again. Withdrawing his gaze from Sun Xian, he raised the head in his hand to the crowd and shouted at General Liu, "General Liu, your men colluded with Dong Shunlai and the others to kill the people of the immortal world. The heads are here. How do you explain that?" "Oomph, ridiculous. Who can testify to that?" General Liu gritted his teeth and said, "I suspect that you were the one who killed him and framed my men." "Liu," Sun Xian shouted coldly. His right hand touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist. He took a step forward and said, "You took Mu Bing and the others out of the prison ahead of time, and Yu Qianqiu was locked in a cage by you. I only rescued him from the cage just now. How did he kill Mu Bing? Although the 7 criminals have already been killed by my sword, their frantic escape is obvious to everyone. Don't tell me you still want to lie through your teeth. Justice is clear. If you dare to brazenly accuse others, I, Sun Xian, will not let you off even if I have to die." Yu Qianqiu was very pleased to hear this. His previous persuasion work hadn't been in vain. This was the first time that this old man had taken the initiative to cooperate with him. Furthermore, his reasoning was so reasonable and well-founded that Yu Qianqiu's suspicions were cleared. Now, no one would believe that he was the culprit except for the mastermind behind the scenes. However, General Liu was one of the masterminds behind the scenes. He naturally knew that no one else could have killed Mu Bing. There was no one else but Yu Qianqiu. However, the inside story could not be made public. Moreover, Sun Xian was clearly threatening him, so he could only suffer in silence. He secretly clenched his teeth and said slowly, after hearing Master Tsang's words, "This reminds me that Yu Qianqiu is indeed still locked in a cage and unable to commit murder. Perhaps there is some inside story behind this. I will definitely get to the bottom of this." Many of the onlookers thought that there was a grudge between Yu Qianqiu and Mu Bing and thought that it was very likely that Yu Qianqiu had killed Mu Bing. However, even General Liu said that Yu Qianqiu could not commit murder while locked in a cage, so they immediately dispelled this idea. For a moment, they began to wonder if the Onyx army had colluded with outsiders to commit murder. But why? Songyun Exan snorted coldly and said nothing more. Both sides knew that this matter would be investigated, but there was no time limit at all. It would definitely be investigated until the end. However, neither he nor Yu Qianshou wanted to be entangled in this matter as long as they were not implicated. Master Tsang, General Liu, who was floating in the air ahead, suddenly spoke again. In addition to the 7 murderers who were killed, more than half of Twilight City has been destroyed, and so many cultivators of the immortal and netherworld have been killed by you. Although it was an unintentional mistake, this is my territory. How do you expect me to explain to my superiors that such a big thing has happened? Songyun Xian immediately narrowed his eyes and stared at him. It was obvious that the other party had suffered a loss just now and was now looking for trouble. In the immortal and netherworld, it had always been the strong who had the final say. Those who had connections, ability, and background would naturally settle the score with him afterward. Those who did not have the ability could only blame it on their bad luck. There was no need for him to stand up for them. However, this was someone else's territory, and he had indeed destroyed Twilight City. If someone insisted on making things difficult for him, it would be understandable. What do you want? Songyun Xian said indifferently. General Liu glanced at Yu Qianshou meaningfully and then replied, Master Tsang, it was an unintentional mistake, but I dare not make the decision on my own. I have to report back to my superiors and wait for their instructions before making a decision. Before that, please cooperate with me and don't leave Twilight City for the time being. Otherwise, it will be difficult to find you. That you're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.